Welcome to another exciting episode on the Fanfic Club. Today, we're exploring a captivating tale called, What If Tonks Was Assigned to Guard Harry at age 8 and Fell So Deeply in Love She Became His Secret Assassin Against Dumbledore. Before we begin, if you enjoy our content, please support us by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. It helps more than you know. And now, the story awaits. Chapter 1. The assignment. Rain pounded against the windows of the Ministry of Magic, drowning out the scratching of quills and murmured conversations. Nymphadora Tonks slouched in her uncomfortable wooden chair, her bubblegum pink hair the only splash of color in the dreary Auror training classroom. She absently twirled her wand between her fingers, the tip occasionally emitting small purple sparks that fizzled before they hit the parchment of her half-completed assignment. Maintaining constant vigilance means maintaining constant focus, Trainee Tonks, growled Alastair Moody, appearing suddenly beside her desk. His magical eye swiveled wildly before fixing directly on her. Unless you believe Death Eaters will be kind enough to wait while you daydream? Tonks straightened immediately, knocking over her inkwell in the process. Black ink spread across her parchment, obscuring her notes on concealment tactics. Sorry, sir. Won't happen again, sir, she mumbled, fumbling for her wand to clean up the mess. Moody snorted. 7 months into training, and still as coordinated as a drunken mountain troll. Yet somehow the best at concealment and disguise I've seen in 15 years. He leaned closer, his scarred face inches from hers. Kingsley wants to see you. Now. Seems you've caught someone's attention. Tonks' heart skipped a beat. At 20 years old, she was the youngest in her Auror training class, and despite her metamorphmagus abilities, she'd struggled to be taken seriously. An individual meeting with Kingsley Shacklebolt, one of the most respected senior Aurors, could either be very good or very bad. Yes, sir. Right away. She gathered her things, trying and failing to look dignified as she knocked over her chair in her haste. Moody's gruff voice followed her to the door. And Tonks? Whatever they're asking you to do, remember that not all missions come through official channels. Trust your instincts. The cryptic warning followed her down the long corridor to Kingsley's office. She paused outside the polished oak door, took a deep breath to compose herself, and knocked. Enter, came Kingsley's deep, reassuring voice. The office was surprisingly bare, a functional desk, 2 chairs, and bookshelves lined with reference materials. Kingsley sat behind the desk, his broad shoulders and calm demeanor radiating authority. But it was the second person in the room that made Tonks freeze mid-step. Albus Dumbledore stood by the window, his long silver beard gleaming in the dim light, half-moon spectacles perched on his crooked nose. His eyes twinkled as they met hers, but something in that twinkle made Tonks' newly developed aura instincts prickle with unease. Ah, Miss Tonks, Dumbledore smiled warmly. How delightful to see you again. I've been hearing remarkable things about your progress. Professor Dumbledore, Tonks managed, shifting her hair unconsciously from pink to a more professional brown. I wasn't expecting, it's an honor, sir. Please, sit, Kingsley gestured to the empty chair. What we're about to discuss is not officially sanctioned by the Ministry, which is why we're meeting here rather than in the Auror department proper. Tonks sat, her curiosity piqued. Not officially sanctioned, sir. Dumbledore moved away from the window. Miss Tonks, or do you prefer Nymphadora? Tonks, please, sir. She winced at the sound of her first name. Tonks, then. Dumbledore nodded. What do you know about Harry Potter's current living situation? The question caught her off guard. Harry Potter. The boy who lived. Only what everyone knows, I suppose. He's living with Muggle relatives somewhere, kept away from our world until he's old enough for Hogwarts. Dumbledore exchanged a glance with Kingsley. Indeed. Harry resides with his maternal aunt and her family in Surrey. He will turn 8 years old this coming July. While certain protective measures are in place, recent concerns have arisen that warrant additional security. You want me to guard Harry Potter? Tonks blurted, then flushed. I mean, sir, I'm just a trainee. Surely a fully qualified Auror would be better suited. On the contrary, Kingsley interjected. This assignment requires someone who won't draw attention in a Muggle neighborhood. Someone who can change their appearance at will. Someone young enough that their presence won't seem unusual to the neighbors, yet skilled enough to provide protection if needed. Your metamorphmagus abilities make you uniquely qualified, Dumbledore added. And your connection to the Black family, while distant, gives you a personal stake in Harry's well-being. After all, Sirius Black was his godfather before. Dumbledore trailed off, but Tonks felt the weight of the unspoken words. Before Sirius betrayed the Potters. Before he murdered Peter Pettigrew and all those Muggles. The shame of being related to the man who had destroyed Harry Potter's chance at a family burned in her chest. The assignment is straightforward, Kingsley continued. You'll establish a cover in the neighborhood. Monitor the boy. Report any unusual activities or threats. You are not to interfere with his home life or reveal yourself to him unless absolutely necessary. What kind of threats are we expecting? Tonks asked, her mind already shifting to tactical assessment. Death Eater remnants? Dumbledore's expression remained serene, but something flickered behind his eyes. Let us hope not, Miss Tonks. But vigilance, as I believe Alastair is fond of saying, is constant. The blood wards protecting Harry are powerful, but not infallible. Blood wards? Tonks frowned. Those are ancient magic, sir. Borderline dark, according to Ministry classification. Sometimes, Miss Tonks, the line between dark and light is not as clear as Ministry regulations would have us believe, Dumbledore replied. The protection Lily Potter bestowed upon her son with her sacrifice is tied to her blood shared by her sister, Petunia Dursley. As long as Harry calls that place home, the protection endures. Tonks nodded slowly, processing the information. How long would the assignment last? 6 months initially, Kingsley replied. With possible extension until he leaves for Hogwarts. 3 years of covert surveillance. It was an enormous commitment for a trainee who should be focusing on completing her qualifications. Yet the alternative was returning to classwork and standard training rotations while someone else watched over the boy who lived. I should warn you, Dumbledore said softly, that this assignment may complicate your training schedule. It would require absolute discretion, knowledge of it would be limited to the 3 of us and Alastair Moody. Why the secrecy? Tonks asked. Surely the Ministry would approve protection for Harry Potter. Again, that brief exchange of glances between the 2 men. Politics, Kingsley said finally. Minister Fudge believes drawing attention to Harry might cause panic, suggesting there's something to be afraid of. And there are still those within the Ministry whose loyalties during the war were ambiguous. What Kingsley means, Dumbledore interjected gently, is that not everyone who served Voldemort wore his mark openly. Tonks didn't flinch at the name, something she knew Dumbledore noted with approval. I understand, she said. When would I start? Immediately, Kingsley replied. You'll be officially assigned to a special training rotation under my supervision, which will explain your absences from regular classes. We've secured a small flat 2 streets away from Privet Drive. Your cover identity is prepared. Dumbledore produced a folder from within his robes. Everything you need to know about Harry's circumstances is contained here. Memorize it, then destroy it. The fewer records that exist, the better. Tonks took the folder, surprised by its thinness. Is this all? Harry's life has been deliberately kept simple and quiet, Dumbledore explained. For his own protection. As Tonks left the office with the folder tucked securely inside her robes, Moody's warning echoed in her mind. Not all missions come through official channels. Trust your instincts. She couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't being told everything. 2 days later, Tonks stood on Wisteria Walk in Little Whinging, Surrey, a small suitcase in hand. She'd altered her appearance to that of a nondescript young woman with shoulder-length brown hair and unremarkable features. The kind of person neighbors would notice moving in and then promptly forget. Her flat was small but functional, one bedroom, a cramped living area, and a kitchenette. The previous tenant had left behind faded floral curtains and a sagging sofa that smelled faintly of cats. Ministry funds had covered the first month's rent, but the place was far from luxurious. She unpacked quickly, then set about placing subtle protective enchantments around the perimeter. Nothing that would trigger the ministry's detectors for magic in Muggle areas, but enough to warn her of any magical presence nearby. The folder Dumbledore had given her was disappointingly sparse. Harry James Potter, born July 31, 1980. Parents James and Lily Potter, deceased October 31, 1981. Current guardians, Vernon and Petunia Dursley, and their son Dudley. Address, No. 4, Privet Drive. The boy attended the local primary school and had no known health issues. There were no photographs, no details about his personality or development, nothing to indicate what kind of child he had become in the years since his parents' murder. Tonks frowned, tapping her wand against her thigh thoughtfully. For a child of such importance, the lack of detailed monitoring was strange. Dumbledore had mentioned blood wards, but what about the boy's well-being otherwise? She decided her first step would be simple observation. Establishing her cover identity in the neighborhood would take time, but she could begin surveillance immediately. As dusk fell, Tonks disillusioned herself and made her way to Privet Drive. The street was eerily uniform, identical houses with identical gardens, distinguished only by different cars in the driveways and the occasional unique garden ornament. No. 4 was particularly pristine, with a perfectly manicured lawn and gleaming windows. She positioned herself across the street, settling in for a long wait. Through the front windows, she could see three people in what appeared to be the living room, a large man with a bushy mustache, a thin woman with an unusually long neck, and a round-faced boy who appeared to be about Harry's age, though considerably larger. Of Harry Potter himself, there was no sign. For 2 hours she watched as the family ate dinner, watched television, and prepared for bed. Not once did she glimpse the boy she was assigned to protect. Had Dumbledore been wrong about his location? Was Harry elsewhere tonight? As the lights in the house began to switch off, Tonks was about to call it a night when she noticed movement in the front garden. A small figure emerged from around the side of the house, carrying what appeared to be garden tools. In the dim glow of the streetlights, she could make out a thin boy with unruly dark hair, wearing clothes several sizes too large. Harry Potter was putting away gardening tools. At nearly 9 o'clock at night. Tonks inched closer, still disillusioned, her training momentarily forgotten as curiosity overcame caution. The boy moved with a quiet efficiency that seemed odd for a child his age. His face, when he briefly looked up at the darkening sky, was solemn and far too thin. Boy. The front door had opened, and Vernon Dursley's bulky silhouette filled the doorway. "Are you finished yet?" "Almost, Uncle Vernon," Harry replied, his voice soft and careful. "Just putting the shears away." "Well, hurry up. And mind you wash properly before you come in. I won't have you tracking dirt through Petunia's clean house." "Yes, Uncle Vernon." The man grunted and closed the door. Harry's shoulders slumped slightly before he straightened again, finishing his task with methodical precision. Tonks felt a growing unease. Why was a 7-year-old child doing garden work at this hour? Why wasn't he included in the family activities she'd observed earlier? She followed as Harry made his way to a side door, where he carefully removed his shoes and shook out his oversized shirt before entering the house. Through the kitchen window, she watched as he washed his hands thoroughly at the sink, then moved through the house with the cautious gait of someone trying not to be noticed. The Dursleys were heading upstairs when Harry emerged into the hallway. Petunia spotted him and frowned. "Your cousin needs his uniform ironed for tomorrow's school trip," she said curtly. "I've left it on the washing machine. See to it before you go to bed." "Yes, Aunt Petunia," Harry replied, his expression carefully neutral. Tonks watched in growing disbelief as Harry, a child barely tall enough to reach the ironing board, set up the iron and began methodically pressing his cousin's uniform. His movement suggested this was a regular task, one he'd performed many times before. When he finally finished, the adults and his cousin were already upstairs. Harry put away the ironing board, turned off the lights, and instead of heading upstairs, moved to a door beneath the staircase. The cupboard under the stairs. He opened it, ducked inside, and closed the door behind him. Tonks stared, certain she'd misunderstood what she'd just witnessed. Surely he wasn't, they couldn't possibly. She waited 10 minutes, then another 10. No one came back downstairs. No lights came on. Harry Potter had gone to bed in a cupboard under the stairs. Rage and disbelief warred within her as she made her way back to her flat, her mind racing. This couldn't be what Dumbledore had intended when he placed the savior of the wizarding world with these muggles. The boy was clearly being used as a servant, possibly worse. Back in her flat, Tonks paced restlessly. Her instructions had been clear: observe, don't interfere. But what she'd seen tonight couldn't be right. Harry Potter, the boy who had defeated the darkest wizard of the age, was sleeping in a cupboard after doing chores that would be excessive even for a child twice his age. She needed more information before confronting Dumbledore or Kingsley with her concerns. One night of observation wasn't enough. Perhaps there was some explanation, some context she was missing. But as she finally fell into an uneasy sleep, Tonks couldn't shake the image of those solemn green eyes and the careful, quiet way Harry had moved through the house, like someone who had learned early that the best way to survive was to go unnoticed. Over the next week, Tonks established her cover as Dora Thompson, a young woman who had moved to Surrey for a job in London and needed a quiet place to commute from. She introduced herself to neighbors, familiarized herself with the area, and maintained a constant yet discreet surveillance of Harry Potter. What she discovered only deepened her concern. Harry woke earlier than the rest of the household, prepared breakfast for the family, and tended to chores before school. His cousin Dudley, who attended the same school, was nearly twice his size and traveled in a pack of boys who seemed to take pleasure in tormenting Harry whenever adults weren't looking. The Dursleys themselves treated Harry with a mixture of indifference and disdain. He was fed, but portions were noticeably smaller than those given to Dudley. He was clothed, but only in his cousin's massive hand-me-downs. He attended school, but his aunt and uncle showed no interest in his education, while lavishing praise on Dudley for the most minor accomplishments. And every night, Harry returned to the cupboard under the stairs. Tonks documented everything meticulously, building a case she could present to Kingsley and Dumbledore. The Blood Wards might protect Harry from external magical threats, but they did nothing to protect him from the people who were supposed to care for him. On the 8th day of her surveillance, as rain pounded against the windows of her flat, Tonks made a decision. Protocol be damned, she needed to make contact with Harry. Not to reveal her purpose or his identity, but to provide some small measure of kindness in what was clearly a joyless existence. The opportunity presented itself the following afternoon. Harry had been sent to the local shop for milk, a task that required him to walk past Wisteria Walk alone. Tonks morphed her appearance slightly, keeping the brown hair but softening her features to appear more approachable, and positioned herself on the path. As Harry approached, head down against the light drizzle, she deliberately dropped her shopping bag, sending apples rolling across the pavement. "Oh, bother," she exclaimed, kneeling to gather them. Harry stopped immediately, bending to help. "I've got this one, miss," he said, retrieving an apple that had rolled near his feet. "Thanks so much," Tonks smiled, getting her first close look at the boy. His eyes were startlingly green behind taped-together glasses, his lightning scar just visible beneath his fringe. He was even thinner up close, his cheekbones sharp beneath pale skin. "I'm a bit clumsy, I'm afraid. Always dropping things." "That's okay," Harry replied, handing her the apple with a politeness that seemed far too mature for a 7-year-old. "I should get going. My aunt's waiting for the milk." "Of course. I'm Dora," by the way. Just moved to Wisteria Walk. I'm Harry, he said, with the cautious air of someone unused to adult interest. Nice to meet you, Harry. Perhaps I'll see you around the neighborhood. Tonks kept her tone casual. He looked surprised at the prospect. Maybe. I don't go out much, except for school and errands. Well, if you ever need help carrying groceries back, I'm at number 16. She pointed vaguely in the direction of her flat. Sometimes it's nice to have a neighbor to call on. Harry nodded, but the confusion in his eyes suggested the concept of a helpful neighbor was foreign to him. I should go. My aunt doesn't like it when I'm late. Of course. Thanks again for the help, Harry. She watched him hurry away, his thin shoulders hunched against the rain, and felt something fierce and protective stir within her. This wasn't just an assignment anymore. This was a child being denied the most basic kindness and care. Later that evening, as Harry weeded the back garden of number 4 while the Dursleys watched television inside, Tonks disillusioned herself and approached the fence. The boy was working methodically, his small hands already dirty and slightly raw from the task. Psst, she whispered, keeping her disillusionment charm intact. Harry. He froze, looking around with wide eyes. Hello. Who's there? It's me, Dora, she said softly. From this afternoon. Don't be scared, I'm invisible at the moment. Harry's eyes grew even wider. Invisible? How? It's a sort of trick, Tonks replied, making a split-second decision. Harry, I know this will sound strange, but I'm a witch. The reaction was immediate and alarming. Harry flinched violently, dropping the trowel and backing away. Don't say that. My aunt and uncle don't like that word. They say magic isn't real and only freaks believe in it. Tonks' heart sank. The Dursleys had clearly been suppressing any mention of magic, and possibly punishing Harry for showing any signs of accidental magic, which would have been manifesting for years now. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I didn't mean to frighten you. But Harry, haven't strange things ever happened around you? Things you couldn't explain. Especially when you were upset or scared. The boy stilled, suspicion and wonder warring on his face. How did you know that? Because the same things happened to me when I was your age. Tonks took a calculated risk and dropped her disillusionment charm, appearing at the fence. Harry gasped but didn't call out. There are people like us, Harry. People who can do things that others can't. My aunt and uncle say I'm a freak, he whispered, the words clearly painful to speak aloud. Anger flashed through Tonks, hot and immediate. You're not a freak. You're special. And one day, you'll understand just how special. Harry stared at her, desperate hope fighting with years of conditioning. Why are you telling me this? Why are you being nice to me? The simple question broke something inside Tonks. Had no one ever been kind to this child without an ulterior motive? Because everyone deserves kindness, Harry. Especially children. She glanced at the house. I should go before they notice me. But I'll be around. If you ever need help, or just someone to talk to, look for me. Before he could respond, she reapplied the disillusionment charm and backed away, leaving Harry staring at the spot where she'd been with a mixture of confusion and longing. Back in her flat, Tonks sent an owl to Kingsley requesting an urgent meeting. She couldn't keep silent about the conditions Harry was living in, no matter what Dumbledore's grand plan might be. The response came swiftly, tomorrow. Leaky cauldron. Noon. Come prepared to explain your actions. The wording suggested Kingsley already knew she'd made contact with Harry. Whether through magical monitoring or other surveillance, her breach of protocol hadn't gone unnoticed. Tonks spent a restless night preparing her arguments. By morning, she was resolute. Even if it cost her the assignment, even if it cost her place in Auror training, she would not stand by while a child suffered. The leaky cauldron was unusually empty for midday, with only a few patrons scattered among the worn wooden tables. Kingsley sat in the furthest corner, his tall frame unmistakable even from the entrance. To Tonks' surprise, he was alone, no sign of Dumbledore. "Trainee," Kingsley acknowledged as she slid into the seat across from him. His expression was unreadable. "You've broken protocol." Tonks met his gaze steadily. "With respect, sir, the protocol is wrong." "Explain." "Harry Potter is being neglected, possibly abused," she said, keeping her voice low. "He sleeps in a cupboard under the stairs. He's treated like a servant. His clothes are rags. He's obviously underfed compared to his cousin. And they're actively suppressing any signs of magic, he's terrified of the word itself." Kingsley's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "These are serious allegations." "They're not allegations. They're observations." Tonks pulled a small notebook from her pocket and slid it across the table. 7 days of documented evidence. Times, dates, specific incidents. The pattern is clear and consistent. Kingsley glanced at the notebook but didn't open it. Dumbledore was quite specific about non-interference. Did Dumbledore know Harry was sleeping in a cupboard? Tonks challenged. Did he know the Dursleys call him a freak whenever he shows signs of accidental magic? Did he know Harry's cousin and his friends have made a sport of hunting him down and beating him? The blood wards protect him from external magical threats, Tonks interrupted, her hair briefly flashing red before she controlled herself. They do nothing to protect him from the people inside the house. Kingsley was quiet for a long moment. Dumbledore believes the protection is worth what? Tonks' voice rose slightly before she checked herself. Worth destroying a child's sense of self-worth. Worth teaching the boy who lived that he deserves nothing but contempt and hardship. He defeated the darkest wizard of our time, and his reward is to be treated worse than a house elf. The magical world isn't always kind to its heroes, Kingsley said quietly. Dumbledore believes Harry needs to develop resilience. Resilience? Tonks repeated incredulously. Is that what we're calling it? There's a difference between resilience and systematic destruction of a child's spirit. Kingsley steepled his fingers, studying her. What exactly did you do, Tonks? How far did your contact go? I introduced myself as a new neighbor. Offered him kindness. Let him know he wasn't alone. She met Kingsley's gaze unflinchingly. And yes, I told him I'm a witch. After seeing his reaction to the word, his fear, I couldn't let him continue believing he was a freak for having magical abilities. You revealed the existence of magic to a child who is supposed to be kept ignorant of his heritage until his Hogwarts letter arrives, Kingsley summarized, his tone neutral. I didn't tell him about Hogwarts. I didn't tell him about his parents or Voldemort or his fame. I just told him he wasn't alone, that there were others like him. Tonks leaned forward. Sir, you should have seen his face. No child should look that hopeless. Kingsley was quiet again, longer this time. When he finally spoke, his voice had softened slightly. Dumbledore has his reasons, Tonks. Reasons that go beyond what any of us fully understand. The protection Harry gains from living with his mother's blood is crucial. I'm not suggesting removing him from the house entirely, Tonks countered. But surely there are ways to ensure he's treated properly while maintaining the blood protection. Monitoring charms. Regular visits from someone who can check on his welfare. Consequences for the Dursleys if they mistreat him. And who would implement these measures? Kingsley asked. The Ministry, with its factions and politics. The same ministry where Lucius Malfoy and other former Death Eaters wield significant influence. Tonks hesitated. It would have to be someone Dumbledore trusts. Someone who already knows about Harry's situation. Like you. Kingsley's lips twitched, almost a smile. Why not? Tonks straightened. I'm already assigned to watch over him. Let me do more than just watch. Let me help him. Not by removing him from the protection, but by making sure he has at least one person in his life who treats him with basic human decency. Kingsley tapped the notebook thoughtfully. What you're proposing goes well beyond your original assignment. My original assignment was to protect Harry Potter, Tonks said firmly. I'm just expanding the definition of protection to include his emotional and psychological well-being. Dumbledore won't approve. Then don't tell him the details, Tonks suggested. Tell him I'm maintaining my cover by establishing a neighborly relationship. Tell him I'm gathering more intelligence on the Muggle environment. Tell him whatever you need to, but let me help that boy. Kingsley studied her for a long moment. You feel that strongly about this? I do. Tonks held his gaze. Sir, if you'd seen what I've seen, if you'd spoken to him, you wouldn't be able to walk away either. Finally, Kingsley nodded. Very well. You may continue your expanded interpretation of your protective duties. But Tonks, his voice took on a warning tone, there are limits. You cannot reveal his identity or heritage. You cannot take him from that house for extended periods. And you cannot directly confront the Dursleys about their treatment of him. I understand, Tonks said, relief flooding through her. Do you? Kingsley looked skeptical. Because this puts you in a precarious position. If Dumbledore discovers the full extent of your involvement, the consequences could be severe. I'll be discreet, Tonks promised. But I won't stand by and do nothing. No, I can see that you won't. Kingsley stood, towering over the table. One last thing, trainee. Your actions may have already altered the course Dumbledore has set. Be prepared to take responsibility for those alterations, whatever they may be. With that cryptic warning, Kingsley left, taking her notebook with him. Tonks remained at the table, turning his words over in her mind. What course had Dumbledore set for Harry Potter? And why did the thought of altering it feel more like salvation than interference? The following Saturday morning found Tonks waiting near the local park, knowing from her observations that Harry would be sent to weed the public flower beds, a task Vernon Dursley had volunteered his nephew for with the local council, presenting it as community service, rather than the free child labor it actually was. Sure enough, Harry appeared at 9 o'clock, carrying gardening tools that looked too heavy for his thin arms. He worked methodically, his movements suggesting he'd done this many times before. Tonks approached casually, carrying a small paper bag. Morning, Harry. Fancy meeting you here. He looked up, surprise and wary pleasure crossing his face. Hello, Miss Dora. Just Dora is fine, she smiled, settling on the grass near where he worked. Hard at work already? It's Saturday morning. Shouldn't you be watching cartoons or something? Harry shrugged. Uncle Vernon says I should make myself useful. Tonks hummed noncommittally. Well, I brought breakfast. Care to join me for a quick break? I accidentally bought too much. She opened the bag to reveal pastries from the local bakery, nothing extravagant enough to raise suspicion, but far better than the meager breakfast she'd observed Harry receiving earlier. Harry hesitated, glancing around as if expecting his uncle to materialize. I should finish this section first. Of course. I'll just sit here and keep you company, shall I? Tonks settled more comfortably. Unless you'd rather be alone. No. The word came quickly, almost desperately. I mean, company would be nice. Tonks chatted about inconsequential things as Harry worked, the weather, the neighborhood, a funny story about getting lost on the bus yesterday. She kept her tone light and casual, but watched Harry carefully, noting how he gradually relaxed in her presence. When he finally took a break, accepting a pastry with obvious delight, Tonks steered the conversation gently toward his life. So, what do you like to do for fun, Harry? When you're not helping out your aunt and uncle, I mean. Harry considered the question as if it were complex mathematics. I like to read, he said finally. When I can. The school library lets us borrow books sometimes. What kind of books? Adventure stories. Fantasy. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. Stories about magic, but don't tell my aunt and uncle. Tonks smiled. Your secret's safe with me. I've always liked those kinds of stories too. Stories where ordinary people discover they're actually special. Harry's eyes lit up. Like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Exactly like that. Tonks nodded enthusiastically. Where the children find out they're actually kings and queens in another world. I always wished something like that would happen to me, Harry admitted, then looked embarrassed. It's silly. It's not silly at all, Tonks said firmly. Everyone dreams of discovering they're special somehow. That there's more to the world than what we can see. Harry studied her intently. Like when you said you were a witch? And you disappeared? Tonks glanced around to ensure they were alone. Yes. Exactly like that. Can you show me something else? Harry asked, his voice hushed with excitement. Something magical. Tonks hesitated, considering Kingsley's warnings. But the hope in Harry's eyes was impossible to resist. She concentrated, scrunching up her face, and changed her nose to that of a pig's snout. Harry gasped, delight replacing the perpetual wariness in his expression. How did you do that? Tonks changed her nose back. It's a special ability I have. Not all witches and wizards can change their appearance like I can. There are others. Other witches and wizards. Harry leaned forward eagerly. A whole society of us, Tonks confirmed. Hidden alongside the regular world. We have our own schools, shops, government, everything. And you think I might be, like you? Harry asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Tonks chose her words carefully. I think you have gifts that make you special, Harry. Gifts your aunt and uncle might not understand or appreciate. Is that why they don't like me? Because I'm different? The question broke Tonks' heart. People fear what they don't understand. But Harry, being different isn't bad. It's what makes you who you are. Harry absorbed this, his young face solemn. Will I learn to do things like you can? Change how I look or disappear? You'll learn all sorts of things when the time is right, Tonks assured him. But for now, it's our secret, okay? It's not safe for everyone to know about people like us. Why not? Well, Tonks considered how to explain. Some people, like your aunt and uncle, are afraid of what's different. And fear can make people do unkind things. Harry nodded, understanding all too well. I won't tell anyone. I promise. Good lad. Tonks glanced at his half-eaten pastry. Now finish that up before it gets cold. Growing boys need proper food. As Harry devoured the rest of his breakfast, Tonks made a mental note to bring food more often. Simple kindness and decent meals, it wasn't much, but it was a start. Over the following weeks, Tonks established a pattern of coincidental meetings with Harry. In the park, at the local shop, on his way to or from school. Each time, she brought food, conversation, and most importantly, respect, treating Harry as a person of value rather than an unwanted burden. She was careful never to directly undermine the Dursleys' authority, knowing that would only make Harry's home life more difficult. Instead, she offered an alternative perspective, a window into a world where Harry wasn't a freak, but special, where his differences were gifts to be celebrated rather than suppressed. In small, age-appropriate ways, she prepared him for the truth he would eventually learn. She told him stories disguised as fairy tales, about a school where young witches and wizards learned to use their abilities, about a dark wizard who had been defeated by a baby's extraordinary power, about a society hidden in plain sight. Harry soaked up these stories with an eagerness that was both heartening and heartbreaking. This, Tonks realized, was what childhood wonder should look like, not the fearful compliance she'd first observed in him. 2 months into her assignment, Tonks sent a carefully worded report to Kingsley, subjects welfare stable. Protection measures maintained. Supplemental support proving beneficial to subject's development. Recommend continuation of current approach. The response was brief, approved. Maintain discretion. D. Remains unaware of full scope. D. Dumbledore remained unaware of how deeply involved Tonks had become in Harry's life. She should have felt relief at this confirmation. Instead, she felt a growing unease. Why was Kingsley helping her circumvent Dumbledore's instructions? What did he know that she didn't? The answers began to emerge on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in November, when Tonks received an unexpected visitor. Alastor Moody appeared at her flat without warning, his magical eye swiveling wildly as he swept the place for threats or surveillance before speaking. "You've gotten yourself into quite the situation, haven't you, trainee?" he growled, settling his bulky frame into her small armchair. "Sir." Tonks kept her expression neutral. "Don't play dumb, girl. It doesn't suit you." Moody fixed both eyes on her, the normal one and the magical one. "Potter. The boy. Dumbledore's grand project." Tonks stiffened. "I'm following my assignment to protect him." "Are you, now?" Moody's scarred face twisted into what might have been a smile. "And does protection typically include teaching a 7-year-old about magic before his time? Undermining his guardian's authority? Altering the course Albus Dumbledore has so carefully laid out?" Panic flared briefly before Tonks got it under control. "How do you know?" Moody barked a laugh. "Girl, there's precious little that happens around Harry Potter that isn't monitored by someone. The question isn't how I know. The question is why I'm here instead of Dumbledore himself." Tonks waited, sensing Moody wasn't finished. "Kingsley's been running interference," Moody continued, confirming her suspicions. "Editing your reports before they reach Dumbledore. Minimizing the extent of your involvement." "Why would he do that?" Moody leaned forward, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Because not everyone agrees with Dumbledore's methods. Because some of us remember what James and Lily Potter sacrificed, and question whether they would approve of their son being raised like a pig for slaughter." The phrase sent a chill through Tonks. "What do you mean, a pig for slaughter?" Moody's magical eye swiveled toward the window, checking for eavesdroppers. "Dumbledore plays a long game, trainee. Longer than you or I can fully comprehend. He sees patterns, makes connections, plans decades ahead. And sometimes, in all that grand strategy, the individual pieces, the people, become secondary to the overall design." "Harry isn't a piece on a chessboard," Tonks said fiercely. "No," Moody agreed, surprising her. "He's not. He's a boy. A boy who, if Dumbledore's theories are correct, has a terrible destiny ahead of him. A destiny Dumbledore believes requires a certain temperament." "What kind of temperament?" Tonks asked, though she already suspected the answer. "The kind developed by hardship. By deprivation. By learning early that authority figures can't be trusted to protect you. By discovering that you must ultimately rely on your own courage and sacrifice." Moody's expression was grim. "Dumbledore believes Harry Potter must be willing to die when the time comes." Tonks felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her. "Die? But he's just a child." "Now, yes. But the darkness isn't gone, trainee. It's waiting. Gathering strength. And when it returns, Dumbledore believes only Harry Potter will have the power to end it, possibly at the cost of his own life." That's monstrous," Tonks whispered. "Is it?" Moody challenged. "If one boy's suffering, even his death, could save thousands. Would you make that trade, or?" "Because that's the kind of decision Dumbledore has been making for decades." Tonks shook her head, refusing to accept the premise. "There has to be another way. And even if there isn't, even if Harry ultimately has to face whatever darkness is coming, why deny him love and support now? Why not give him something worth fighting for?" "Precisely the question some of us have been asking," Moody nodded approvingly. Which brings me to why I'm here. You've started something, trainee Tonks. Something that could have far-reaching consequences. The question is, are you prepared to see it through? To take responsibility for potentially altering the course Dumbledore has set. The echo of Kingsley's warning wasn't lost on Tonks. What exactly are you suggesting, sir? I'm suggesting that if you're going to interfere with Albus Dumbledore's plans, you'd better have plans of your own. Moody's expression hardened. The boy needs protection, real protection, not just from external threats but from Dumbledore's own machinations. Are you willing to provide that, whatever the cost? Tonks thought of Harry, his solemn green eyes, his quiet resilience, the way his face lit up with wonder when she showed him simple magic. She thought of him sleeping in a cupboard, being called a freak, living a life devoid of the love and care every child deserved. Yes, she said firmly. Whatever it takes. Moody studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Good. Because there's more to this situation than you know. Much more. He reached into his coat and withdrew a thick folder, far more substantial than the one Dumbledore had provided. Start with this. Everything we know about Harry Potter's situation. Everything Dumbledore didn't tell you. Tonks took the folder, her hands trembling slightly. You're not the first to question Dumbledore's methods, girl. Nor will you be the last. Moody stood, his magical eye sweeping the room one last time. Read it carefully. Memorize it. Then burn it, like the last one. And when you're done. Well, I suspect you'll know what needs to be done. After Moody left, Tonks sat for a long time with the unopened folder in her lap. She had stepped onto a path that would put her in direct opposition to one of the most powerful wizards in Britain, perhaps the world. The sensible thing would be to step back, to follow her original instructions, to trust in Dumbledore's greater wisdom and experience. But then she thought of Harry, and knew she couldn't turn back. With steady hands, she opened the folder and began to read. Hours later, as dawn broke over Little Whinging, Tonks finally closed the folder, her mind reeling with what she'd learned. Prophecies. Horcruxes. The true nature of Harry's scar. Dumbledore's suspicions about how Voldemort might have survived. The potential necessity of Harry's death to truly defeat the Dark Lord. It was horrifying. It was heartbreaking. And it changed everything. If Dumbledore was right, if Harry truly bore a fragment of Voldemort's soul within his scar, then the headmaster's long game became clear. He was raising a martyr, not a champion. A sacrifice, not a savior. But what if there was another way? What if the fragment could be destroyed without killing Harry? What if he could be prepared for his destiny without being broken by neglect and abuse? Tonks stared out the window at the lightning sky, her resolve hardening into determination. She had promised to protect Harry Potter, and she would keep that promise, not just from external threats, not just from his unloving relatives, but from Dumbledore's well-intentioned but ultimately cruel calculations. Whatever it took, she would find another way. She would give Harry Potter the childhood he deserved, the love and support he needed, and the preparation for the challenges ahead. And when the time came to face his destiny, he wouldn't face it alone. As she gathered the papers to destroy them as Moody had instructed, Tonks realized with a start what had changed within her. This wasn't just an assignment anymore. This wasn't just a duty. She had come to care for Harry Potter, not as the boy who lived, not as a symbol or a weapon or a sacrifice, but as a child. A brave, kind, resilient child who deserved far better than the fate Dumbledore had planned for him. And in that moment, Nymphadora Tonks made a vow, not an unbreakable vow sealed by magic, but something perhaps even more binding, a promise made with her whole heart. She would protect Harry Potter, whatever it took. Even if it meant standing against Albus Dumbledore himself. Even if it meant becoming something she had never imagined, not just a guardian, but an assassin of fate itself. Chapter 2, The Revelation. Morning frost glittered across the windows of number 16, Wisteria Walk as Nymphadora Tonks studied the collection of parchments spread across her kitchen table. Nearly 18 months had passed since she'd first been assigned to guard Harry Potter, and in that time, she had built a careful web of protection around the boy that went far beyond Dumbledore's original instructions. She traced her finger over the latest intelligence report Moody had smuggled to her. Another suspected Horcrux location, a seaside cave where Tom Riddle had once terrorized fellow orphans during a summer outing. The information was tantalizing but incomplete, like all the fragments Moody's network had gathered about Voldemort's path to immortality. Horcruxes, she murmured, the word still tasting foul on her tongue even after months of research. Split his soul into how many pieces, you mad bastard? A knock at her door disrupted her thoughts. 3 quick raps, pause, 2 more, Harry's signal. Tonks hastily swept the parchments into a drawer, cast a quick locking charm on it, and morphed her appearance to match the Dora Thompson identity Harry knew. Coming. She called, checking that her wand was readily accessible in her sleeve before opening the door. Harry stood on her doorstep, 9 years old now and still too thin for his age, though no longer the desperately malnourished child she'd first met. His green eyes brightened at the sight of her. You said Saturday morning would work, he asked tentatively, clutching a worn backpack. Of course it works, Tonks grinned, stepping aside to let him in. Did your aunt and uncle go for it? Harry's expression shifted to something sly and satisfied. Aunt Petunia was happy to have me out of the house while she hosts her garden club. And Uncle Vernon thinks I'm doing extra chores for Mrs. Fig. Tonks felt a momentary pang of unease at the mention of Arabella Fig, another of Dumbledore's watchers, though Harry didn't know it. The old squib reported directly to Dumbledore and had no idea of Tonks' expanded role in Harry's life. Keeping their meetings secret from Mrs. Fig had become a delicate dance of timing and misdirection. Well, we've got 4 whole hours then, Tonks said, leading him to the living room where books and games waited. What do you want to start with today? Harry's expression grew serious as he pulled a notebook from his backpack. I've been practicing that meditation thing you showed me. I think something happened yesterday. Tonks sat up straighter. Tell me. I was doing the breathing exercise before bed, and I felt something, like a warm current running from my chest to my fingers. He demonstrated with a gesture. Then my torch, the one that had dead batteries. It suddenly turned on. Just for a few seconds, but I swear I didn't touch it. Controlled wandless magic, Tonks murmured, impressed. That's advanced, Harry. So it was magic. I really did it. His face lit up with pride. Absolutely. Most wizard children your age can only do accidental magic, when they're scared or angry. Deliberately channeling it takes focus and intent. Tonks leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. I couldn't do that until I was nearly 13. The praise made Harry beam, and Tonks felt the now familiar mixture of pride and sadness. Every milestone, every achievement that should have been celebrated by loving parents fell to her instead, their clandestine meetings the only place Harry could truly be himself. Shall we build on that today? She asked, reaching for one of the elementary magic theory books she'd carefully selected from Flourish and Blotts. I think you're ready to learn about magical cores and how we access them. Harry nodded eagerly. Their Saturday sessions had evolved into structured lessons, ostensibly tutoring in mathematics and sciences that the Dursleys believed a neighbor was charitably providing to improve Harry's disappointing, and deliberately sabotaged, school performance. In reality, Tonks was providing Harry with a foundational magical education that most pureblood children receive before Hogwarts. Before we start, Harry said hesitantly, can you know. He gestured to his face. Tonks smiled and morphed her features through a quick series of changes, pig snout, duck bill, cat eyes, and finally settling on her natural appearance with bubblegum pink hair. Better? She asked. Much better, Harry grinned. I like when you look like you. The simple statement caught her off guard. In the wizarding world, her metamorphmagus abilities had always been treated as either a novelty or a useful tool. Harry was the first person who seemed to genuinely appreciate her natural appearance, even prefer it to her disguises. Right then, she said, clearing her throat against a sudden swell of emotion. Let's talk about magical cores. Every witch and wizard has one, think of it like a well of power inside you. The morning passed quickly as they worked through basic magical theory, practiced meditation techniques to help Harry sense and direct his magic, and played simple games designed to strengthen his control. By noon, he had successfully made a feather hover for nearly 30 seconds without touching it, a feat that left him exhilarated but exhausted. Brilliant work, Harry, Tonks said as they broke for lunch. You're picking this up faster than most first years with wands. When will I get a wand? Harry asked through a mouthful of sandwich. Tonks felt the familiar tightening in her chest. When you turn 11. That's when your Hogwarts letter will come, and we'll be able to get all your school supplies, including your wand. And then I won't have to hide anymore. The hope in his voice was painful to hear. Well, you'll still need to be careful around muggles, non-magical people, Tonks corrected herself. But at Hogwarts, you'll be surrounded by people like us. You can use magic openly there. Harry fell silent, contemplating this while finishing his lunch. Tonks watched him, noting the changes in him over the past year and a half. He stood taller now, more confident. The constant wariness hadn't disappeared entirely, the Dursleys had done too much damage for that, but it had receded, replaced by a quiet self-assurance. Dora, he said finally, will you still be my friend when I go to Hogwarts? Will I still see you? The question pierced her. Harry, I will always be your friend. Always. No matter what happens or where you go. But you won't be in Little Whinging anymore, will you? Once I'm gone, there's no reason for you to stay. Perceptive as always. The cover story of her Little Whinging residence being for a London job had always been thin, sustainable only because the Dursleys cared so little about their nephew's activities. I might not be in Little Whinging, she admitted, but that doesn't mean I'll be out of your life. There are ways to stay in touch in the wizarding world, ways much faster and easier than Muggle Post. Harry nodded, accepting this without further question, another change from the boy who had once been afraid to ask for anything. Tonks silently blessed the day she decided to breach protocol and make contact with him. Whatever consequences came, they were worth it for the transformation in this child. After lunch, they switched to history, not the Goblin Rebellion-focused curriculum of Hogwarts, but the real history of Wizarding Britain, including the rise and fall of Voldemort. Tonks had debated how much to tell Harry about his own role in that history, ultimately deciding on a gradual approach that prepared him without overwhelming him. So this dark wizard, Voldemort, Harry still stumbled slightly over the name, he killed a lot of people. Including my parents? Yes, Tonks confirmed gently. He and his followers, called Death Eaters, believed in wizarding superiority over Muggles. Your parents fought against him as part of a resistance group. And then he tried to kill me, but couldn't. That's how I got my scar. That's right. Somehow, when he tried to kill you, his curse rebounded. It destroyed his body, though many believe his spirit survived in some form. Harry's hand went to his forehead, fingers tracing the lightning bolt scar that Tonks now knew contained a fragment of Voldemort's soul. Why me? Why did he come after my family specifically? Tonks hesitated. This was dangerous territory, the prophecy was something Dumbledore had kept closely guarded. But Harry deserved to know why his life had been shaped the way it had. There was a prophecy, she said carefully. A prediction that a child born at the end of July would have the power to defeat Voldemort. He knew part of the prophecy and targeted you because of it. Harry's eyes widened. A prophecy? About me? What did it say exactly? I don't know the exact wording, Tonks lied smoothly. Thanks to Moody's intelligence network, she knew precisely what the prophecy contained, but sharing that burden with a 9-year-old seemed unnecessarily cruel. But it indicated that you would have power the Dark Lord knows not, and that one of you would eventually defeat the other. So, he might come back? Harry asked, his voice small. And I'll have to fight him? Tonks moved to sit beside him, wrapping an arm around his thin shoulders. If he does come back, and there are many who believe he will try, you won't face him alone, Harry. I promise you that. There are people, good people, who will stand with you. Like you. Harry looked up at her, trust evident in his eyes. Exactly like me, Tonks affirmed. And by the time you face any such challenge, you'll be prepared. That's what all this is about, not just learning magic, but learning to think strategically, to understand your opponents, to recognize who you can trust. Is that why we practice occlumency? Harry asked, referring to the mental shielding techniques Tonks had begun teaching him, simplified for his age, but still effective for basic protection. Precisely. Some wizards can read thoughts or influence minds. Building mental shields protects you from that. Harry nodded thoughtfully. Is Dumbledore one of those wizards? The one who left me with the Dursleys? The question caught Tonks off guard. She'd mentioned Dumbledore only in passing, careful not to bias Harry against the headmaster despite her own growing misgivings. Yes, he's skilled in legilimency, mind reading. How did you know? Harry shrugged. You tense up whenever his name comes up. And you've told me about how he's the headmaster at Hogwarts and a powerful wizard, but you never say much else about him. Tonks silently cursed her transparency. For all her Auror training in deception, this child could read her like an open book. Dumbledore is complicated, Harry. He's done great things for the wizarding world. He defeated a dark wizard even before Voldemort. He's brilliant and powerful. But he left me with the Dursleys, Harry finished. Even though they hate magic. Even though they hate me. The simplicity of his assessment cut through all the justifications and grand strategies. Yes, Tonks admitted. He did. Why? One word. Such a simple question with such a complex, terrible answer. He believed you would be safer there, Tonks said carefully. There's a magical protection tied to your mother's sacrifice, a protection that flows through her blood relatives. Living with your aunt maintains that protection. But not protection from the Dursleys themselves, Harry observed with a bitterness no 9-year-old should possess. No, Tonks agreed quietly. Not from them. Harry was silent for a long moment. You don't trust him, do you? Dumbledore. Tonks considered lying, considered offering platitudes about Dumbledore's wisdom and the difficult choices leaders must make. Instead, she gave Harry the respect of honesty. I question his methods, she said finally. I believe he has good intentions, he wants Voldemort defeated, the wizarding world safe. But I think sometimes he focuses so much on the big picture that he forgets about the individual people affected by his decisions. People like me, Harry said. People like you, Tonks confirmed. Harry, when you go to Hogwarts, Dumbledore will take an interest in you. He'll likely be kind, grandfatherly even. And in many ways, he does care about your welfare. But I should be careful what I tell him, Harry finished. Keep my occlumency shields up. Not let him know how much I already know about magic. Tonks nodded, impressed and a little alarmed at how quickly he grasped the situation. It's not about seeing him as an enemy, Harry. It's about understanding that even good people can make mistakes when they believe they're working for a greater purpose. Like keeping things from people, for their own good? Harry asked, making air quotes. Exactly like that. Tonks ruffled his hair affectionately. You're too smart for your own good, you know that. The moment was interrupted by the alarm on Tonks' watch, their signal that Harry needed to start heading back before his absence became suspicious. As she helped him gather his things and replace the educational materials with innocuous Muggle textbooks that supported their tutoring cover story, Tonks felt the familiar guilt about sending him back to Privet Drive. 18 months of covert intervention had improved his situation somewhat. The Dursleys now treated him with wary neglect rather than active cruelty, thanks to a few carefully orchestrated coincidences that made them believe Harry was being watched, but it was still far from the loving home he deserved. Same time next Saturday? Harry asked at the door. Actually, Tonks grinned, I've arranged something special. It's the Easter holidays next week, and I've convinced your aunt and uncle that you've been selected for an educational day program. We'll have 3 full days together. Harry's face lit up. Really? What are we going to do? Well, officially we're visiting museums and educational sites around London. Tonks winked. Unofficially, I thought we might take a carefully disguised trip to some wizarding locations. You're ready to see more of your world, I think. Harry threw his arms around her waist, hugging her tightly. Thank you, Dora. For everything. Tonks returned the embrace, feeling the now familiar protective surge that went beyond duty or assignment. Off you go, then. Remember, head down, nothing unusual, straight back to Privet Drive, Harry recited with a small smile. I know the drill. Tonks watched him walk away, waiting until he turned the corner before closing the door. She leaned against it, closing her eyes briefly against the wave of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. She had crossed so many lines now, professional, ethical, personal. What had begun as a simple protection detail had evolved into something far more complicated. She was actively subverting Dumbledore's plans, secretly educating the boy who lived, and worst of all, forming an emotional attachment that went far beyond the professional distance her Auror training demanded. And yet, she couldn't bring herself to regret any of it. With a sigh, she returned to the kitchen and unlocked the drawer containing Moody's intelligence reports. The information about the seaside cave needed to be verified, and there were other leads to follow on potential Horcrux locations. If they could identify and destroy the soul fragments before Voldemort found a way to return to physical form, perhaps Harry could be spared the confrontation the prophecy seemed to demand. As she sorted through the parchments, a small owl appeared at her window, one of the nondescript ministry messengers used for routine communications. The message it carried, however, was far from routine. Position available, Dada. 1 year only. September start. Perfect cover. Consider it. K. Kingsley's terse style was unmistakable, as was his meaning. A teaching position at Hogwarts, specifically defense against the dark arts, starting the September after next. When Harry would begin his first year. Tonks stared at the message, mind racing. The Dada position was notoriously difficult to fill due to the apparent curse that prevented any professor from lasting more than 1 year. For Kingsley to have advanced knowledge of an opening meant someone in the current chain of succession had been redirected, creating a vacancy that could be filled by someone sympathetic to their cause. Someone who could protect Harry from within Hogwarts itself. It was audacious, risky, and potentially brilliant. As a professor, she would have legitimate authority to interact with Harry, to continue his training under the guise of extra help, to watch for Dumbledore's manipulations directly rather than from a distance. But it would also place her directly under Dumbledore's gaze, requiring a level of deception she wasn't sure she could maintain. The headmaster was a skilled legilimens. Hiding her true intentions from him would be far more difficult than hiding them from the oblivious Dursleys. She penned a quick, equally cryptic reply, interested. Need details and preparation. Time frame works. As the owl disappeared into the distance, Tonks felt the weight of what she was considering. This would be no simple act of insubordination or bending of rules. This would be a deliberate infiltration of Dumbledore's domain, a direct challenge to his authority and plans for Harry. This would be, in every sense that mattered, a declaration of war. The 3 broomsticks hummed with the usual weekend crowd, Hogwarts professors enjoying a brief respite from their duties, local residents meeting for gossip and drinks, the occasional traveler passing through. Tonks sat in a shadowy corner booth, her appearance altered to that of a middle-aged witch with streaks of grey in her dark hair, nondescript enough to avoid attention, different enough from her usual disguises that anyone who knew Dora Thompson wouldn't make the connection. Across from her, Kingsley Shacklebolt sipped his fire whiskey with the casual air of a man enjoying a weekend drink, not someone engaged in what amounted to conspiracy against the most powerful wizard in Britain. The position opens next June, he said, voice pitched low enough that even nearby tables couldn't overhear. Quirrell is taking a sabbatical year for field research, then returning to his Muggle studies post. The curse ensures whoever takes Dada won't last beyond Harry's first year, but that gives you time to establish a foundation. And Dumbledore would accept my application? Tonks asked skeptically. I'll barely have 3 years of Auror experience by then. There must be more qualified candidates. Qualified candidates aren't exactly lining up for a position known to be cursed, Kingsley pointed out. But more importantly, you have something they don't, my recommendation. Dumbledore trusts my judgment when it comes to defense instructors. He also trusts your loyalty, Tonks noted. Aren't you concerned about the position that puts you in? Kingsley's dark eyes met hers steadily. I am loyal to Dumbledore in the fight against the darkness. That doesn't mean I agree with all his methods. There are lines I won't cross, not even for him. Using a child as a sacrifice being one of them, Tonks murmured. Precisely. Kingsley glanced around before continuing. Alastair has shared his concerns, then. And then some. Tonks took a sip of her butterbeer. The Horcruxes, the prophecy, Dumbledore's suspicions about Harry's scar, it's worse than I imagined. It's a terrible burden to place on a child, Kingsley agreed. Made worse by denying him the love and support that might make it bearable. Why? Tonks asked, the question that had haunted her for months finally breaking free. Why isolate him? Why allow the neglect? I understand the blood protection, but surely there were other ways. Dumbledore believes suffering builds character, Kingsley interrupted gently. More specifically, he believes it builds the kind of character willing to make the ultimate sacrifice when called upon. He's grooming Harry to die, Tonks said flatly. Kingsley didn't deny it. He believes it may be necessary, yes. The prophecy, combined with what he knows of the Horcruxes, he sees no other way. Then he's not looking hard enough, Tonks countered. There must be a way to destroy the soul fragment without killing Harry. If there is, we haven't found it yet, Kingsley reminded her. But that doesn't mean we stop looking. In the meantime, we give Harry what Dumbledore won't, preparation, knowledge, and yes, even love. We make sure that if the worst comes, he faces it as a choice made freely, not a fate accepted blindly. Tonks nodded, some of her anger subsiding in the face of Kingsley's calm rationality. The Dada position would help with that. But there's still the matter of deceiving Dumbledore, a legilimens of extraordinary skill. Which is why you'll spend the next year perfecting your occlumency, Kingsley said. I've arranged for specialized training. Not with Snape, he added, seeing her expression. There are others skilled in the art who owe me favors and have no love for Dumbledore's methods. And my current assignment? Who watches over Harry if I'm in training? You'll maintain your cover in Little Whinging, but with reduced hours. We've identified others who can supplement the surveillance, trusted individuals outside Dumbledore's immediate circle. The pieces were falling into place with a precision that suggested this had been planned for some time. How long have you been considering this, Kingsley? The Auror's expression turned somber. Since you sent your first real report on the Dursleys' treatment of Harry. The one Dumbledore never saw. I realized then that a choice would eventually have to be made, follow Dumbledore's path regardless of the cost, or find another way. And you chose another way, Tonks said quietly. I chose to keep my options open, Kingsley corrected. I still believe in Dumbledore's ultimate goal, Voldemort must be defeated permanently. But I cannot condone sacrificing a child's humanity to achieve it. Neither, I think, would Lily and James Potter. The mention of Harry's parents hit Tonks hard. She had come to care for the boy so deeply that sometimes she forgot he wasn't hers to protect, that his real parents had died hoping others would love and protect their son as they would have. I'll do it, she said finally. The training, the position, whatever it takes. But Kingsley, if it comes down to a direct choice between Dumbledore's plans and Harry's well-being, you'll choose Harry, Kingsley finished. As would I. As would everyone in our little circle of descent. That's why we're doing this. He raised his glass in a subtle toast. To finding another way. Tonks clinked her butterbeer against his fire whiskey. To Harry Potter, not just the boy who lived, but the boy who deserves to live. The Easter holidays arrived, bringing with them the opportunity Tonks had promised Harry. 3 full days away from Privet Drive, ostensibly for educational enrichment, actually for his first real introduction to the wizarding world. "Are you sure this is safe?" Harry asked as Tonks applied glamour charms to change his appearance. They stood in her flat, preparing for their excursion to Diagon Alley. "Won't someone recognize me?" "Not with these charms," Tonks assured him, carefully covering his distinctive scar and changing his hair to a sandy brown. "And with these," she added, exchanging his taped-together glasses for a pair with plain glass lenses and different frames. "The boy who lived has black hair, green eyes, round glasses, and a lightning scar. You're now James Evans, with brown hair, blue eyes, rectangular glasses, and not a scar in sight." "James Evans," Harry repeated, trying out the name. "My dad's first name and Mum's last name." Seemed fitting. Tonks smiled, touched that he'd made the connection. "Easy for you to remember, too." She'd spent weeks planning this outing, coordinating with Kingsley and Moody to ensure Dumbledore's other watchers would be occupied elsewhere. Mrs. Figg believed Harry was on an official school trip, while Mundungus Fletcher, who occasionally supplemented the surveillance, had been sent on a wild goose chase to Scotland by Moody. "What about you?" Harry asked, studying her appearance. "Who are you today?" Tonks morphed her features into those of a woman in her mid-30s with auburn hair and a sprinkling of freckles. "Call me Aunt Maddie." Just distant enough to explain any awkwardness, close enough to justify taking an interest in your education. Harry grinned. "You've thought of everything." "I try," Tonks winked. "Ready for your first look at Diagon Alley?" The journey to London was uneventful, and soon they were approaching the Leaky Cauldron, invisible to the muggles streaming past on the busy street. "Can you see it?" Tonks asked, indicating the shabby pub between a bookshop and a record store. "It's enchanted so muggles can't notice it." Harry squinted, then his eyes widened. "The Leaky Cauldron?" "Yes. It's like..." It was blurry at first, and then it just popped into focus. "Excellent. Remember, you're James Evans today. Keep your head down, stay close to me, and try not to gawk too obviously at everything." Harry nodded, his expression shifting to the careful neutrality he'd perfected at the Dursleys, a mask that both worried and saddened Tonks. No child should be so adept at hiding their emotions. They moved through the Leaky Cauldron quickly, Tonks nodding politely to Tom the barman but not stopping for conversation. In the small courtyard behind the pub, she tapped the bricks with her wand in the familiar pattern and watched Harry's face as the archway formed, revealing the winding cobblestone street beyond. The look of pure wonder that overtook his carefully neutral expression made every risk worthwhile. "Welcome to Diagon Alley," Tonks said softly. Harry stepped through the archway as if in a trance, his eyes darting from the apothecary with its barrels of strange ingredients to quality Quidditch supplies with its display of racing brooms, from Elop's Owl Emporium with its soft hooting to Flourish and Blots with its towering stacks of books. "It's..." he began, then shook his head, words failing him. "I know," Tonks smiled. "I felt the same way the first time I saw it. Come on, let's explore." They spent the morning wandering the alley, Tonks pointing out shops Harry would visit when he got his Hogwarts letter while carefully avoiding Gringotts, where the goblins might see through their disguises. She bought him ice cream at Florian Fortescue's, let him press his nose against the window at the Magical Menagerie, and finally steered him to Flourish and Blots. "We can actually go in here," she explained. "I want to get you a few books that will help with what we've been studying." Inside, Harry moved through the shelves with reverence, running his fingers along the spines of books with titles like Practical Defensive Magic and its Use Against the Dark Arts and A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration. "Can I really have books of my own?" he asked quietly, the longing in his voice piercing Tonks' heart. "Of course," she assured him. "We'll need to keep them at my place for now, but they'll be yours. And when you go to Hogwarts, you'll have all the books you need. She helped him select a small collection, basic texts on magical theory, a simplified history of modern wizarding Britain, and a children's book of wizarding fairy tales that every magical child grew up with. As they approached the counter, Harry's eyes widened at a display near the register. Aunt Mattie, look, he whispered, pointing to a stack of books titled Harry Potter, the Boy Who Lived with a stylized lightning bolt on the cover. That's me. Tonks silently cursed herself for not anticipating this. The Boy Who Lived was a celebrity, his story commercialized in ways she hadn't fully explained to Harry. Those are fictional stories, she said quietly. Made-up adventures based on your name. None of it's real, just people's imagination of what you might be like. Harry stared at the books, a complicated mix of emotions crossing his face. People write made-up stories about me? Without even knowing me? I'm afraid so, Tonks said. When you defeated Voldemort, you became famous. People, well, they turned you into a sort of symbol. A hero. But I was just a baby, Harry frowned. I don't even remember what happened. I know. It's not fair. Tonks steered him away from the display. That's part of why we're being careful today. The real Harry Potter deserves privacy, a chance to be himself without all those expectations. Harry nodded slowly, processing this new information. Is that why Dumbledore put me with the Dursleys? To keep me away from all this? Partly, Tonks acknowledged. Though there were other options that would have achieved the same goal without. She trailed off, not wanting to delve into the complexities of Dumbledore's manipulations in the middle of a bookstore. Without making me live in a cupboard. Harry finished with a wry smile that was far too bitter for a 9-year-old. Tonks squeezed his shoulder gently. Let's pay for these and move on. I think you'll like our next stop better. That stop was Weasley's Wizarding Wheezes, not yet the grand emporium it would become, but a small mail-order business the twins ran from a temporary kiosk they set up on weekends and holidays. Fred and George Weasley, still students at Hogwarts but already building their joke shop dream, had been carefully vetted by Moody as potential allies in their cause to protect Harry. Ah, customers. Fred, or possibly George, exclaimed as they approached. Welcome to the future of magical mischief. Looking for something to liven up your Easter holidays, the other twin added with a wink. Harry, still in his James Evans disguise, looked over the display of joke products with growing delight. What's this? He asked, pointing to what looked like an ordinary rubber ball. Ah, excellent choice. George, or possibly Fred, proclaimed. That's a bouncing mood ball. Throw it against a wall, and it changes color based on the mood of whoever catches it. Great for finding out if your professor is really as pleased with your homework as they claim. Or if your mum really believes you had nothing to do with the missing biscuits, the other twin added. Harry laughed, a genuine, carefree sound that Tonks realized she rarely heard from him. She made a mental note to incorporate more fun into their lessons, more opportunities for Harry to simply be a child. As Harry examined the various products, Tonks moved closer to the twins. Good selection you've got here, she said casually. Must take a lot of skill to create these. Advanced charms work, I'd imagine. Indeed it does, one twin replied with a knowing look. We're particularly fond of items with practical applications beyond mere jokes. Such as? Tonks prompted. Well, take our extendable ears, for instance, the other twin said, indicating what looked like flesh-colored strings. Still in development, but they'll eventually allow the user to eavesdrop on conversations from a distance. Perfect for hearing what your professors are saying about you behind closed doors. Or what certain headmasters might be plotting, the first twin added quietly, meeting Tonks' eyes directly. The message was clear, Moody had briefed them well. The Weasley twins might project an image of carefree pranksters, but they were sharp, magically talented, and already wary of Dumbledore's machinations. We might be interested in becoming early investors, Tonks said, using the coded phrase Moody had established. particularly in products with educational applications. The twins exchanged a glance. "We're always looking for like-minded business partners," one said. "Perhaps we could discuss terms over a butterbeer sometime." "I'd like that," Tonks nodded. "In the meantime, I think young James here should experience some proper magical mischief." They left the kiosk with a small collection of joke products, Harry clutching his purchases with unconcealed glee. They were brilliant, he enthused. "Do you think all wizards are that fun?" "Definitely not," Tonks laughed. "The Weasley twins are in a category all their own. But speaking of the Weasleys, there's someone else I'd like you to meet while we're here." She led Harry to the small cafe where she'd arranged to accidentally encounter Arthur Weasley, who was in Diagon Alley on ministry business. Like the twins, Arthur had been carefully sounded out by Moody and found to be concerned about Dumbledore's plans for Harry, though not yet brought fully into their confidence. Arthur was exactly where he'd said he would be, nursing a cup of tea while reading the Daily Prophet. Tonks guided Harry to the neighboring table, deliberately sitting so that her shopping bags would encroach on Arthur's space. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she apologized as one bag nudged his chair. "Bit crowded in here today, isn't it?" Arthur looked up with his customary good-natured smile. "Not at all, not at all. Plenty of room for everyone." His eyes crinkled as he noticed Harry. "Hello there, young man. Enjoying your visit to the alley?" "Yes, sir," Harry replied politely. "It's my first time." "First time? Well, that's exciting. I remember my children's first visits, like watching them discover a whole new world." Arthur extended his hand. "Arthur Weasley, by the way." "James Evans," Harry said, shaking the offered hand. "And this is my Aunt Maddie." "Pleasure," Tonks smiled. "Are you here on business or pleasure, Mr. Weasley?" "Bit of both," Arthur replied. "Work for the ministry, misuse of Muggle artifacts office, but I always try to make time for a wander around the shops. Fascinating place, Diagon Alley. Always something new to see." The conversation flowed easily from there, with Arthur sharing anecdotes about his children, carefully avoiding specific mentions of their ages, which might make Harry realize Ron would be in his year at Hogwarts, and his work with Muggle objects. Harry, initially shy, gradually opened up, asking questions about magical transportation and how wizarding homes differed from Muggle ones. Arthur, true to his character, was delighted to explain, his enthusiasm for even the most mundane aspects of wizarding life infectious. By the time they parted ways an hour later, Harry had received an informal but comprehensive introduction to wizarding family life that books could never provide. "He was nice," Harry commented as they left the cafe. "He has 7 children. That must be brilliant, having such a big family." The longing in his voice was unmistakable. "The Weasleys are good people," Tonks agreed. "Very different from the Dursleys. In the wizarding world, you'll find all sorts, some like the Dursleys who fear what's different, but many more like the Weasleys who embrace it." As the afternoon wore on, they visited a few more shops before heading back through the leaky cauldron to Muggle London. There, maintaining their cover story, they spent an hour at the British Museum before returning to Surrey. "That was the best day ever," Harry declared as they approached Tonks' flat, his arms laden with carefully disguised magical purchases. "Can we go back tomorrow?" "Tomorrow we're trying something different," Tonks said. "Less crowded, but equally magical. Pack comfortable shoes, we're going on a nature walk." That nature walk turned out to be a carefully guided tour of a small magical nature preserve disguised as a fenced-off conservation area in the countryside north of London. Under the guidance of a former Hogwarts Care of Magical Creatures professor who had joined their growing network of allies, Harry got his first glimpse of magical plants and creatures in their natural habitat. "These are botruckles," the elderly professor explained, indicating what appeared to be small, stick-like creatures camouflaged against a gnarled old tree. "Tree guardians. They protect wandwood trees, this one's a particularly fine ash that supplied many a wand maker." Harry watched, fascinated, as the tiny creatures moved along the branches. They look like little walking twigs with arms and legs. Excellent natural camouflage, the professor nodded approvingly. Makes them nearly invisible to muggles, who generally see what they expect to see. Now, over here we have a patch of flux weed, essential in certain potions, but must be harvested at the full moon for full potency. The day continued in this vein, with Harry absorbing information about magical flora and fauna with an eagerness that delighted both Tonks and the professor. By late afternoon, Harry had sketched dozens of plants and creatures in the notebook Tonks had provided, asked countless questions, and even been allowed to feed a young mooncalf that the preserve was rehabilitating. "You have a natural gift with magical creatures, young man," the professor commented as they prepared to leave. "Good instincts, you approach with respect rather than fear or dominance. That will serve you well in your studies." Harry beamed at the praise. "Will I learn about all these creatures at Hogwarts?" "Some, yes, though care of magical creatures isn't offered until third year," the professor explained. "But a foundation of observation and respect will help in all your magical education." The third day of their holiday was dedicated to magical history and culture, with a disguised visit to a small wizarding museum in Oxford that specialized in artifacts and exhibits deemed too mundane for the grander collections. Here, Harry could explore the everyday aspects of wizarding life throughout the centuries, how magical homes functioned before modern spells, how wizarding fashion had evolved alongside Muggle trends, how magical education had developed before the founding of Hogwarts. "It's strange," Harry commented as they examined a display of wizarding games through the ages. "Some things are so different from the Muggle world, but others are almost exactly the same." "People are people, magical or not," Tonks replied. "We all need the same basic things: food, shelter, community, entertainment. The methods might differ, but the underlying needs don't." Harry nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think that's why Voldemort was wrong? Because he thought wizards and muggles were fundamentally different, when really we're not?" The insight, coming from a 9-year-old, took Tonks by surprise. "That's remarkably perceptive, Harry." "Yes, I think that's a big part of it. Voldemort and his followers saw only the differences, not the similarities." "The Dursleys do the same thing," Harry observed. "Just in reverse. They think being magical makes me a freak, something unnatural. But it's just another way of being human, isn't it?" "Exactly," Tonks agreed, touched by his wisdom and saddened that it had been earned through such difficult experiences. "Being magical doesn't make you better or worse than Muggles, just different in one specific way." As they finished their tour and prepared to return to Surrey for the final time, Tonks felt a bittersweet mix of emotions. The 3 days had been a resounding success. Harry had received a comprehensive introduction to the wizarding world far beyond what most Muggle-raised children got before their Hogwarts letters. He'd made connections, however tenuous, with potential allies who would recognize and support him when he officially entered magical society. But tomorrow he would return to Privet Drive. To the cupboard under the stairs, to Dudley's bullying, to Vernon and Petunia's cold disdain. The contrast between the wonder of these 3 days and the bleak reality of his daily life seemed especially cruel. As if reading her thoughts, Harry spoke quietly as they boarded the train back to Surrey. "I don't want to go back." Tonks felt her heart break a little. "I know, Harry. Couldn't I just stay with you? We could say I ran away. Or that the Dursleys sent me to a boarding school. They'd probably be happy to be rid of me." "The blood protection," Tonks reminded him gently. "As long as you can call Privet Drive home, you're protected from Voldemort and his followers." "Some protection," Harry muttered. "Safe from dark wizards, but not from being locked in a cupboard or starved." Tonks couldn't argue with that assessment. Instead, she tried another approach. "It won't be forever, Harry. Just until you're 17 and come of age in the wizarding world. And most of that time you'll be at Hogwarts, only returning to Privet Drive for summers." "That's still 8 more years," Harry pointed out. "Almost as long as I've been alive already." "I know it seems like forever," Tonks acknowledged. "But we'll make it better, bit by bit. And I'll be with you every step of the way, I promise. Harry studied her face, searching for any sign of insincerity. Finding none, he nodded slowly. Okay. I trust you, Dora. Those 4 simple words carried more weight than any oath Tonks had ever taken. This child, who had so little reason to trust adults, was placing his faith in her. She would die before betraying that trust. I won't let you down, she promised, and meant it more than anything she'd ever said. In the months that followed the Easter holidays, Tonks' double life grew increasingly complex. By day, she continued her Auror duties, now fully qualified and assigned to Kingsley's unit. Evenings and weekends were split between her little whinging cover identity, where she maintained her role as Harry's tutor and covert guardian, and intensive occlumency training with the specialist Kingsley had arranged. The training was brutal, far more demanding than anything in the Auror program. Her instructor, a taciturn Eastern European wizard with no known allegiance to either Dumbledore or the Ministry, showed no mercy as he repeatedly battered against her mental defenses. Again, he commanded after successfully breaching her shields for the 5th time in an hour. Your surface thoughts are controlled, but your emotions betray you. The boy's face appears whenever you feel protective. The old man's when you feel anger. These associations must be severed if you wish to deceive a master legilimens. Exhausted, sweat beading on her forehead, Tonks rebuilt her defenses. How? These aren't just random associations, they're fundamental to why I'm doing this. The motivation remains. The emotional signature must change. The instructor circled her like a predator. You must learn to think of the boy clinically when under mental assault. He becomes a student, an assignment, a puzzle to solve, not a child you've grown to love. The old man becomes an obstacle, a challenge, a respected opponent, not a manipulator you resent. That sounds like lying to myself, Tonks objected. It is precisely that, the instructor confirmed without apology. But only during occlumency. The rest of the time, feel what you wish. When you sense a probe, however, you must instantaneously transform those emotional signatures. The concept went against everything Tonks believed about authenticity, but she couldn't deny its necessity. Dumbledore was too skilled, too perceptive to be deceived by conventional occlumency shields alone. If she was to protect Harry from within Hogwarts, she would need every advantage. Again, she said, squaring her shoulders. By midsummer, her progress was substantial. She could now maintain complex shields under sustained attack, present false memories convincingly, and, most crucially, transform her emotional signatures on demand. The cost was high, frequent migraines, occasional dissociative episodes, and a constant low-level anxiety about which version of herself was the real one, but the alternative was unacceptable. Meanwhile, Harry's education continued, now expanded to include basic potions, brewed with non-magical ingredients to avoid detection, more advanced wandless magic exercises, and increasingly detailed information about wizarding culture and politics. So there are 4 houses at Hogwarts, Harry summarized during one of their lessons, and they each value different traits. Gryffindor for bravery, Ravenclaw for intelligence, Hufflepuff for loyalty, and Slytherin for ambition. That's the simplified version, yes, Tonks nodded. Though there's more nuance to each. Gryffindors also tend to be impulsive and glory-seeking. Ravenclaws can be creative rather than traditionally book-smart. Hufflepuffs value hard work and fairness as much as loyalty. And Slytherins prize cunning and self-preservation alongside ambition. Which house were you in? Harry asked curiously. Hufflepuff, Tonks smiled. Though the Sorting Hat considered Gryffindor. Said I had the recklessness for it, but ultimately decided my loyalty was my defining trait. And my parents? They were Gryffindors, right? Both of them, yes. Your father was a Gryffindor through and through, brave to the point of recklessness sometimes. Your mother had some Ravenclaw traits, but her courage won out. Harry considered this thoughtfully. Everyone probably expects me to be in Gryffindor too. Many will, Tonks acknowledged. But the Sorting Hat takes your own desires into account. If you have a strong preference, it will consider that. Even Slytherin? Harry asked, his expression curious rather than repulsed. You said Voldemort was from Slytherin, and most of his followers too. Even Slytherin, Tonks confirmed. Not everyone from that house becomes a dark wizard, Harry. The traits themselves aren't good or evil, it's how you use them that matters. Ambition can drive you to achieve great things for the benefit of others. Cunning can help you outwit enemies without resorting to violence. You wouldn't mind if I was in Slytherin? Harry pressed, watching her closely. Tonks recognized the test for what it was. I wouldn't mind if you were in any of the houses, Harry. I care about who you are, not which dormitory you sleep in at school. His shoulders relaxed slightly. Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon always talk about how my parents were no good, layabouts, freaks. But they were brave enough to fight against Voldemort, weren't they? To die protecting me? They were incredibly brave, Tonks affirmed. Your father was an Auror, a dark wizard catcher, like me. Your mother was brilliant at charms and potions. They both joined the Order of the Phoenix, a secret organization that fought against Voldemort when the Ministry couldn't or wouldn't do enough. Tell me more about them. Harry requested, his eyes hungry for information about his parents. Tonks hesitated. Her knowledge of James and Lily Potter was limited to case files and second-hand accounts. I didn't know them personally, I was only about 8 when they died. But I've talked to people who did know them. She shared what she'd learned from Moody about James Potter's skill as a duelist, his close friendship with Sirius Black, carefully avoiding the betrayal narrative, as Moody had expressed doubts about the official story, his talent on the Quidditch pitch. She told Harry what little she knew of Lily Evans Potter, her exceptional charm work, her fierce defense of those she loved, her willingness to befriend those others rejected. They sound wonderful, Harry said softly when she finished. I wish I could remember them. They loved you very much, Tonks assured him. Everything they did, joining the fight against Voldemort, going into hiding, standing against him that night, it was all to give you a chance at a better world. Harry was quiet for a long moment. Do you think they'd be proud of me? Even though I'm not, you know, doing anything special. Harry, Tonks said gently, they'd be incredibly proud of the person you're becoming. You're kind despite having been shown little kindness. You're thoughtful when you could have become bitter. You work hard at everything you attempt. Those aren't small things, they're the foundations of a good person. The smile that bloomed on Harry's face was worth every risk Tonks had taken, every line she'd crossed. For that smile, she would defy Dumbledore 100 times over. As summer faded into autumn, preparations intensified. Harry's 10th birthday had come and gone, celebrated quietly with a small cake in Tonks' flat and a gift of his own wizard chess set, enchanted to remain inanimate around Muggles. Less than a year remained until his Hogwarts letter would arrive, and with it, the beginning of Dumbledore's direct influence over his life. Tonks' network of allies had grown steadily, each carefully vetted by Moody or Kingsley. Beyond the Weasley twins and Arthur, they had cautiously sounded out Minerva McGonagall, finding her troubled by Dumbledore's placement of Harry with the Dursleys but not yet ready to actively oppose the headmaster. Remus Lupin, former friend of James Potter, had been more receptive, though his condition made regular involvement difficult. Most surprisingly, Madame Pomfrey had reached out through Moody, having harbored concerns about Dumbledore's methods for years but lacking the platform to challenge him. Each ally brought different skills and knowledge to their cause. The Weasley twins continued developing devices that could aid in surveillance and communication. Lupin provided insights into Dumbledore's methods during the First War against Voldemort. Pomfrey offered medical knowledge that might prove crucial in addressing the Horcrux in Harry's scar. The question of Sirius Black remained contentious. Moody had shared his doubts about Black's guilt, pointing to procedural irregularities in his case: no trial, no interrogation under Veritaserum, no examination of his wand. But without concrete evidence of his innocence, attempting to contact him in Azkaban was too risky. If Black is innocent, He's the legal guardian Dumbledore circumvented, Kingsley noted during one of their infrequent full meetings. That makes him both our most powerful potential ally and our greatest liability. Dumbledore would immediately suspect his involvement in any change to the status quo. But if he's innocent, he spent a decade in Azkaban for a crime he didn't commit, Tonks argued. We can't just leave him there. We need evidence before we can act, Moody growled. The rat is the key, Pettigrew. If he's alive as I suspect, Black couldn't have killed him. How do we find a man who's been presumed dead for a decade? Tonks asked. We don't, Kingsley interjected. Not directly. But we can create conditions where he might reveal himself, or where Black might have an opportunity to prove his innocence. The conversation had ended inconclusively, with the question of Sirius Black's innocence and potential role in their plans left for future resolution. For now, their focus remained on preparing Harry for his entry into Hogwarts and Tonks for her infiltration of the staff. In late October, nearly 20 months after Tonks had first been assigned to guard Harry Potter, she received a summons she'd been dreading, a private meeting with Albus Dumbledore. The message came via Kingsley, his expression grave as he delivered it. He wants to discuss your continued surveillance of Harry Potter. Tomorrow evening, his office at Hogwarts. Has he discovered something? Tonks asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. If he has, he hasn't shared it with me, Kingsley replied. But he mentioned being impressed with your dedication to the assignment. That could be genuine, or it could be bait. I'll need to be careful, Tonks murmured. Occlumency shields at full strength. Not just shields, Kingsley warned. You'll need the false narrative we constructed, the concerned professional who's maintained distance while ensuring basic welfare. Nothing about the tutoring, the magical education, certainly nothing about our growing network. Tonks nodded, already mentally rehearsing the carefully crafted persona she would present. What about the dad apposition? Should I expect him to mention it? Possibly. If he does, express measured interest, not too eager, not too reluctant. Remember, at this point he believes your presence in Little Whinging is solely for Harry's protection, not for any particular attachment to the boy. I understand. Tonks took a deep breath, steadying herself. I can do this. Kingsley studied her for a long moment. You've come a long way from the trainee who knocked over her inkwell in class. But Dumbledore isn't just another test, Tonks. He's the most skilled legilimens alive, with decades of experience reading people. I know the risks, Tonks assured him. But I also know what's at stake. The following evening found Tonks climbing the spiral staircase to the headmaster's office, her occlumency shields firmly in place, her appearance carefully neutral, professional but not severe, her hair a conservative brown rather than her preferred pink. Enter, Dumbledore's voice called before she could knock. The office was just as she remembered from her student days, circular, lined with portraits of former headmasters, all apparently sleeping, though Tonks knew better than to believe it, filled with whirring silver instruments whose purposes she could only guess at. Fawkes the Phoenix sat on his perch, watching her with intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through her disguises, both physical and mental. And behind the desk, Albus Dumbledore himself rose to greet her, resplendent in midnight blue robes embroidered with silver stars, his half-moon spectacles perched on his crooked nose, his blue eyes twinkling with apparent warmth. Ah, Nymphadora, or do you still prefer Tonks? He asked kindly. Tonks, please, headmaster, she replied with a polite smile. Only my mother uses Nymphadora, and only when she's cross with me. Dumbledore chuckled. Tonks it is, then. Please, sit. Would you care for tea? Perhaps a sherbet lemon? The offer was innocuous, but Tonks knew better than to accept food or drink that might be laced with subtle potions to lower mental defenses. Just tea, thank you, she said, knowing she could pretend to sip without actually drinking. As Dumbledore prepared the tea with wandless magic, Tonks took the opportunity to center herself, to fully inhabit the persona she had constructed, the dedicated Auror who viewed Harry Potter as an important assignment but not a personal cause. You've been watching over young Harry for quite some time now, Dumbledore observed as he handed her a delicate porcelain teacup. Nearly 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, sir, Tonks nodded. It's been an educational assignment. In what ways, may I ask? The question seemed innocent, but Tonks recognized the probe for what it was. Learning to maintain long-term surveillance without detection. Balancing ministry duties with specialized assignments. Observing the interaction between magical protection and Muggle environments. And the boy himself? Dumbledore asked, his eyes fixed on hers. What have you observed of Harry Potter? Here Tonks offered the carefully constructed half-truth. He appears physically healthy, if somewhat small for his age. Academically average, though I suspect that's by design rather than lack of ability. Socially isolated, few friends, targeted by his cousin and his cousin's friends. The Dursleys provide basic necessities but little affection. You disapprove of his living situation, Dumbledore noted, not a question but a statement. It's not ideal, Tonks acknowledged, allowing a hint of her genuine concern to show through. The best lies always contained elements of truth. But I understand the importance of the blood protection. Security must sometimes take precedence over comfort. Dumbledore nodded slowly. A mature perspective. Many in your position might have been tempted to interfere, to try to improve the boy's circumstances through direct intervention. Tonks felt the subtle pressure against her mental shields, not a direct attack, but a gentle probing, seeking emotional reactions that might betray her. She maintained her defenses while projecting the appropriate mix of professional concern and disciplined restraint. My orders were clear, sir. Observe, protect from external threats, don't interfere with the home environment. And you've followed those orders admirably, Dumbledore said, leaning back in his chair. Kingsley speaks very highly of your discipline and discretion. Which brings me to the reason I've asked you here today. Here it comes, Tonks thought, maintaining her neutral expression. As you may be aware, Hogwarts will require a new defense against the dark arts professor for the coming academic year, Dumbledore continued. Professor Quirrell has requested a sabbatical for field research. Given your performance in this sensitive assignment, and Kingsley's recommendation of your skills, I find myself wondering if you might be interested in the position. Tonks allowed herself to appear surprised but intrigued. I'm honored by the consideration, Headmaster. But I'm relatively junior in the Auror department. Surely there are more experienced candidates. Experience in years is not always the most important qualification, Dumbledore replied. You have shown adaptability, discretion, and a commitment to protection that I find particularly valuable. Additionally, he added with a small smile, the position carries a certain reputation that discourages many potential applicants. The curse, Tonks acknowledged. No professor has lasted more than a year since you refused the position to Tom Riddle. Something flickered in Dumbledore's eyes, surprise, perhaps, that she knew this piece of history. Indeed. Most view it as a career interruption at best. However, a year of teaching experience would be valuable on an Auror's record, demonstrating communication skills and knowledge transfer abilities. That's true, Tonks agreed, feigning thoughtful consideration of an offer she had been preparing for months to accept. And the timing is interesting, with Harry Potter beginning his education at Hogwarts next year. Ah, yes, Dumbledore nodded, watching her carefully. I wondered if that might factor into your thinking. Having spent so long ensuring his safety, you might feel a certain responsibility toward the boy. The trap was subtle but unmistakable. Dumbledore was testing whether her interest in the position stemmed from genuine career considerations or from an attachment to Harry that went beyond her assignment. It would provide continuity in his protection, Tonks replied carefully. Though obviously in a different capacity. At Hogwarts, he'll have multiple layers of security that don't exist in Little Whinging. Quite so, Dumbledore agreed. Well, I won't press you for an immediate answer. Take some time to consider the opportunity. The position would begin next September, with some preparatory work over the summer to develop your curriculum. Thank you, Headmaster. I'll give it serious thought. Dumbledore smiled benignly. Excellent. Now, perhaps you could share a bit more about young Harry's development. Anything notable in his behavior or abilities? The conversation continued for another half hour, with Dumbledore probing subtly for information about Harry while Tonks provided carefully edited observations. She mentioned nothing of his precocious magical control, his growing knowledge of the wizarding world, or the bond that had formed between them. Instead, she painted a picture of a quiet, somewhat withdrawn child who showed occasional signs of accidental magic but otherwise seemed unremarkable. Throughout, she felt the gentle pressure against her mental shields, never a direct assault, but a constant testing of weak points, seeking cracks in her defenses. Her training served her well. She maintained the false persona consistently, allowing only the emotions and thoughts that supported her cover story. When she finally left the headmaster's office, the relief was so intense she had to lean against the wall of the corridor for a moment, breathing deeply to steady herself. She had passed the first test. Dumbledore had offered the position, shown no obvious suspicion of her activities, and seemingly accepted her portrayal of Harry as an ordinary, if somewhat neglected, child. But this was only the beginning. The real challenge would come when she took up the teaching position, when she would be under Dumbledore's observation daily, when Harry arrived at Hogwarts and they had to pretend to have only the most basic prior acquaintance. As Tonks left the castle grounds and prepared to apparate back to her flat, she found herself thinking not of the risks or the complex web of deception, but of Harry. Of his face when she'd last seen him, excited about their plans for his upcoming birthday, eager to show her his latest progress with wandless magic. For him, she would face Dumbledore's scrutiny 1,000 times over. For him, she would become whatever was necessary, teacher, protector, or even, if it came to it, Dumbledore's secret adversary. The line between guardian and assassin, she was beginning to realize, was thinner than she had ever imagined. December brought snow to Little Whinging and with it, a rare opportunity. The Dursleys were traveling to the Canary Islands for the holidays, a trip that conspicuously excluded Harry, who was to be left with Mrs. Figg. With careful planning and the help of their growing network, Tonks had arranged for Mrs. Figg to be called away for a family emergency, leaving Harry in the care of the responsible neighbor tutor, instead. This gave them 2 full weeks together without the constraints of their usual secrecy, 2 weeks in which Harry could live in a home where he was valued, where magic was celebrated rather than feared, where he could simply be a child. You mean I'll stay here? The whole time? Harry had asked when she'd first explained the plan, his expression a mix of disbelief and hope. The whole time, Tonks confirmed. We'll have Christmas together, and I've taken leave from work. Just the 2 of us. Now, 3 days into the Dursleys' absence, Tonks watched Harry as he sat cross-legged on the floor of her living room, carefully levitating multiple objects simultaneously, a skill that had taken her until her 3rd year at Hogwarts to master. His face was a study in concentration, his green eyes focused, his brow furrowed slightly with the effort. That's it, she encouraged as he successfully added a 4th item to the hovering collection. Now hold them steady and try rotating the book clockwise while moving the pencil in the opposite direction. Harry's tongue poked out slightly from between his teeth as he attempted the complex manipulation. The book wobbled, then began to slowly turn, while the pencil moved jerkily in a counterclockwise circle. I'm doing it, he exclaimed, then promptly lost concentration, sending all 4 objects clattering to the floor. Oh. Sorry. Don't apologize, Tonks laughed. That was brilliant, Harry. Most first-years can't manage that kind of control even with a wand. Harry beamed at the praise. Will I still be allowed to do wandless magic once I get a wand? Or will the professors expect me to only use my wand? Most will expect wand use, Tonks acknowledged. Wandless magic isn't typically taught until Newt level, if at all. But that's an advantage for you. People underestimate what you can do without a wand, which could be useful in tight situations. You mean if I'm in danger? Harry asked perceptively. Hopefully you won't be, Tonks said, though they both knew it was a possibility. But it's always good to have skills others don't expect. Speaking of which, ready to try something new. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small hand mirror. We've been working on controlling objects outside yourself. Now let's try something more challenging, controlling your own appearance. Harry's eyes widened. Like you do. But I'm not a metamorphmagus. No, but simple appearance charms don't require that ability, Tonks explained. Most witches and wizards can learn basic cosmetic spells, changing hair color, hiding blemishes, that sort of thing. The principles are similar to what we've been practicing, just directed inward. She demonstrated, using her wand to change her hair from pink to blue. For you, without a wand, it'll be harder. But given how quickly you've mastered other wandless skills, I think you might manage it. Harry took the mirror eagerly. What should I try first? Something simple, like changing your hair color. Just the fringe, perhaps. Tonks sat beside him. The visualization is key. Feel your magic, direct it to your hair, and picture the color changing. For the next hour, Harry attempted the transformation with increasing frustration and no success. Tonks was about to suggest they break for lunch when he let out a gasp. Look, he exclaimed, pointing to the mirror where a single lock of hair at his temple had turned a distinctive Weasley red. I did it. Brilliant. Tonks grinned. That's faster progress than I expected. Try to hold it while I fetch the camera, this is definitely one for the album. The album was a carefully hidden record of Harry's magical education, photographs, notes on his progress, mementos of their time together. It was both a security risk and a necessity. Tonks couldn't bear the thought of these precious moments being lost to memory alone. The 2 weeks passed in a blur of such moments, magical training in the mornings, exploration of wizarding culture in the afternoons, through books, photographs, and carefully selected visitors from their network, and evenings spent simply enjoying each other's company. They decorated a Christmas tree together, baked cookies using recipes from Tonks' mother, though with decidedly mixed results given her culinary skills, and played endless games of exploding snap and wizard chess. On Christmas morning, Harry woke to find a small pile of presents waiting, not just from Tonks, but from several of the allies who had come to care about his welfare. There were hand-knitted gloves from Molly Weasley, who didn't know Harry personally but had been told by Arthur about James Evans, a Muggle-raised child entering the wizarding world, a collection of chocolate frogs from the Weasley twins, a book on magical creatures from Remus Lupin, and even a small, anonymously delivered package that Tonks recognized as coming from Minerva McGonagall. I can't believe all these people sent me presents, Harry marveled as he carefully unwrapped each gift. They don't even really know me. They know enough, Tonks smiled. They know you're a good kid who deserves a proper Christmas. And some of them knew your parents, which makes you special to them. Harry's expression grew more serious. Will I meet them? The people who knew my parents? Some of them, yes, Tonks assured him. Once you're at Hogwarts, you'll meet Professor McGonagall, who taught both your parents. And I'm hoping to arrange a meeting with Remus Lupin soon, he was one of your father's best friends. What about my godfather? Harry asked. You mentioned once that I had one. Tonks hesitated. The question of Sirius Black remained complicated. That's a difficult situation. Your godfather is Sirius Black. He's currently in Azkaban, wizard prison. Harry's eyes widened. Prison? What for? He was accused of betraying your parents to Voldemort, Tonks said carefully. And of killing another of their friends, Peter Pettigrew, along with 12 Muggles. Accused? Harry caught the specific wording immediately. You don't think he did it? Tonks sighed. Honestly, Harry, I don't know. There are inconsistencies in the case. He never received a trial, which was common in the chaos after Voldemort's fall, but troubling in retrospect. Moody, the Auror I've told you about, has doubts about his guilt. Could we find out? If he's innocent, shouldn't he be free? And if he's my godfather? We're working on it, Tonks assured him. But it's complicated. If he is innocent, freeing him would mean challenging the Ministry's handling of the case, which won't be easy. And Dumbledore accepted his guilt without question, which makes me wonder if there's something we're missing. Harry nodded slowly. But you'll keep trying. If he's innocent, he shouldn't be in prison. And he hesitated, a vulnerability crossing his face. If he's innocent, he might want to, be a part of your life. Tonks finished gently. I'm sure he would, Harry. From what I've heard, he adored you as a baby. The conversation was becoming too heavy for Christmas morning. Tonks reached for the final present, her own gift to Harry, carefully wrapped in paper decorated with flying snitches. Here. This one's special. Harry unwrapped it carefully to reveal a simple leather-bound journal and what appeared to be a regular Muggle fountain pen. It's a communication journal, Tonks explained. I have its partner. Whatever you write in yours appears in mine, and vice versa. It's not quite instantaneous, there's a delay of a few minutes, but it's much faster than Owl Post. And the pen is charmed to look like regular ink to anyone but you. To everyone else, it will seem like you're writing ordinary homework or notes. Harry ran his fingers reverently over the journal's cover. So when I'm at Hogwarts, we can talk every day. Every day, Tonks confirmed. No matter where I am or what I'm doing. And no one will know we're communicating. The journal represented a significant risk. If discovered, it would reveal their prior relationship immediately. But the thought of Harry facing Hogwarts, facing Dumbledore's machinations, without a direct line to her was unthinkable. Harry clutched the journal to his chest. This is the best present ever. There's one more thing, Tonks said, reaching into her pocket. It's not exactly a Christmas present, more of a precaution. She handed him a small, innocuous-looking silver ring. It's a portkey, a magical transportation device. If you're ever in immediate danger, twist it 3 times on your finger and say, Sanctuary. It will bring you directly to a safe location. Harry slipped the ring onto his finger. It adjusted itself to fit perfectly. What kind of danger? Any kind, Tonks said seriously. I don't expect you'll need it, but I'll feel better knowing you have it. It's for true emergencies only. The Ministry traces unauthorized portkeys, so using it would reveal some of what we've been doing. But your safety is more important than secrecy. The portkey had been Moody's contribution, created through his connections in the Department of Magical Transportation and registered under a false purpose. It would transport Harry to a safe house known only to their inner circle, bypassing even the most powerful wards. I understand, Harry nodded solemnly. Emergency only. The rest of Christmas Day passed in a blur of food, games, and laughter. In the evening, they bundled up against the cold and walked through the neighborhood to see the Christmas lights, Harry's hand securely in Tonks as they discussed which magical additions they would make if Muggles weren't around to see. As they returned to the warmth of the flat, Harry quiet and thoughtful beside her, Tonks realized with a pang that this might be their last truly carefree time together. Soon Harry would be at Hogwarts, under Dumbledore's watchful eye. Soon she would be playing the role of Professor Tonks, maintaining a professional distance from the boy who lived. Soon they would both be engaged in a dangerous game of deception and countermanipulation. Penny for your thoughts, she asked as they shed their coats and settled on the sofa with hot chocolate. Harry stared into his mug for a long moment. I was just thinking, this is what it's like, isn't it? Having a real family. Someone who cares about you, who gets you presents and makes you hot chocolate and walks with you to see the lights. The simple observation squeezed Tonks' heart. Yes, Harry. This is what it's like. I wish. He began, then shook his head. Never mind. It's silly. Tell me, Tonks encouraged gently. Harry looked up, his green eyes serious behind his glasses. I wish you could adopt me. Properly, I mean. So I wouldn't have to go back to the Dursleys ever. The wish echoed her own unspoken desire so precisely that Tonks had to take a moment to compose herself. I wish that too, Harry. More than you know. But the blood protection, Harry sighed, the phrase now familiar to both of them. The blood protection, Tonks agreed sadly. And Dumbledore's plans. When I'm 17, though, Harry said with sudden determination. When the protection doesn't matter anymore, and I'm legally an adult in the wizarding world. Then I get to choose my own family, right? Absolutely, Tonks assured him. And Harry, even without legal adoption, even with all the secrecy and complications, you are my family. In all the ways that matter. Harry's smile was worth every risk she had taken, every risk she would take in the future. And you're mine, he said simply. As Harry drifted off to sleep that night in the small bedroom Tonks had prepared for him, she stood in the doorway watching him, marveling at the journey that had brought them here. What had begun as a simple protection assignment had become the most important relationship in her life. This child, this remarkable, resilient, extraordinary child, had changed everything. In the quiet of the Christmas night, Nymphadora Tonks made a decision. She would do more than protect Harry Potter from Dumbledore's manipulations. She would find a way to destroy the Horcrux without harming him. She would dismantle the old man's plans piece by piece. She would ensure Harry had not just survival, but a real life, filled with love and choices and possibilities beyond being a sacrifice for the greater good. Whatever it took. Whatever she had to become. Guardian, teacher, or assassin of fate itself, she would be what Harry needed. The path ahead was dangerous, filled with deception and difficult choices. But looking at Harry's peaceful sleeping face, Tonks knew with absolute certainty that she would walk it without hesitation. For him, she would become Dumbledore's secret adversary. For him, she would rewrite destiny itself. Chapter 3, The Confrontation. Platform 9 3/4 bustled with activity, tearful parents embracing children, owls hooting indignantly in their cages, the Hogwarts Express belching steam that curled through the September air. Amidst the chaos, Tonks stood disillusioned near a stone pillar, watching as the Dursleys' car pulled away from King's Cross without so much as a backward glance at the nephew they'd abandoned between platforms 9 and 10. Harry, pushing his trunk on a trolley with Hedwig's cage balanced precariously on top, took a deep breath and approached the barrier between platforms as they'd rehearsed. His expression was carefully neutral, but Tonks could read the excitement in the set of his shoulders, the slight bounce in his step. Just walk straight at the wall, a kind voice instructed, and Tonks smiled as Molly Weasley appeared beside her youngest son, right on schedule, exactly as they'd planned. The matriarch's appearance wasn't coincidental. Arthur had ensured his family would arrive at precisely this moment, creating the chance meeting that would give Harry his first wizarding friendship. As Harry disappeared through the barrier behind the Weasley twins, Tonks slipped through as well, maintaining her disillusionment charm. She'd see him soon enough in her official capacity as Professor Tonks, but this moment, watching Harry board the train for his first journey to Hogwarts, was too important to miss. The platform was even more chaotic on the magical side. Tonks spotted Harry being helped with his trunk by the twins, then introduced to Ron. She smiled as the boys gravitated toward each other immediately. Their friendship had been a calculated gamble, but one that seemed to be paying off naturally. "He'll be all right," came a low voice beside her. Kingsley Shacklebolt, also disillusioned, had joined her vigil. "I know," Tonks replied softly. "He's more prepared than any first year has a right to be. You'll miss him," Kingsley finished. "Even though you'll see him daily. It won't be the same. At Hogwarts, I have to be Professor Tonks. I can't be his, whatever I've been. His guardian," Kingsley supplied. "His family." Tonks nodded, though the gesture was invisible to her companion. 3 years of secrets, Kingsley. What if it was all for nothing? What if Dumbledore sees through us immediately? "He won't," Kingsley assured her. "Your clemency is exceptional now, and Harry's basic shield should prevent casual intrusion. You've prepared for this." The train whistle sounded, piercing and insistent. Final goodbyes were exchanged, last-minute items passed through windows, and gradually parents retreated as the Hogwarts Express began to move. Tonks watched until the train was a distant speck, then turned to Kingsley. Time to take the staff floor to Hogwarts. Professor Tonks has preparation to do before the feast. Kingsley squeezed her invisible shoulder. Remember the plan. Observe first. Get the lay of the land. Don't act against Dumbledore until you're certain of your ground. I know, Tonks sighed. But seeing Harry pretend we're strangers, it'll be harder than I anticipated. You both knew this day was coming. Trust in your preparation. Trust in Harry. As Kingsley departed, Tonks removed her disillusionment charm and apparat to Hogsmeade, where she would make her official entrance as Hogwarts' newest defense against the dark arts professor. Her appearance was now that of a woman in her late 20s, still young for a professor but not suspiciously so, with shoulder-length hair in a conservative shade of purple, her natural heart-shaped face but with slightly sharper features. This would be her teaching persona, Professor Tonks, approachable but professional, young but competent. Different enough from both her natural appearance and her Dora Thompson disguise that no one would connect them, but still recognizably her. As she walked toward Hogwarts, her trunk floating behind her, Tonks mentally reviewed their plan once more. The first term would be purely observational, learning Dumbledore's routines, identifying his allies within the castle, establishing herself as a competent but unremarkable professor. Harry would integrate himself with his peers, particularly Ron Weasley and, hopefully, Hermione Granger, whom their intelligence suggested would be a valuable ally once brought into their confidence. Only after the Christmas break would they begin to subtly undermine Dumbledore's plans, starting with the Philosopher's Stone that Moody had confirmed was hidden within the castle as some sort of test for Harry. The old headmaster's intentions were clear to their group now, a series of escalating challenges designed to test Harry's resolve, courage, and ultimately, his willingness to sacrifice himself. Well, Albus Dumbledore was about to learn that the boy who lived had more than one protector. And this one wasn't playing by his rules. The great hall glittered with thousands of floating candles, the enchanted ceiling reflecting a clear night sky scattered with stars. Tonks sat at the staff table, maintaining a pleasant expression as she observed the returning students filter in. Her position between Professors Flitwick and Sprout was ideal for both conversation and surveillance of the hall. Nervous about your first feast as faculty? Flitwick asked kindly, noting her slightly stiff posture. Tonks smiled, letting a hint of genuine anxiety show through. A bit. It's strange being on this side of the hall after sitting with the Hufflepuffs for 7 years. You'll adjust quickly, Sprout assured her. We're delighted to have another Badger on staff. Your Auror experience will serve the students well. I hope so, Tonks replied. Though I'm still developing my curriculum. 3 years in the field hardly makes me an expert. Nonsense, Flitwick waved dismissively. Real-world experience is precisely what the defense position needs. Theory only takes students so far. The conversation shifted to teaching advice, giving Tonks the opportunity to scan the hall more thoroughly. At the far end of the table sat Severus Snape, his expression as sour as she remembered from her student days. Beside him, Professor Quirrell, who had returned from his sabbatical unexpectedly to take up his old post of Muggle studies, was engaged in animated conversation with Professor Vector. Quirrell's return had been a complication. Dumbledore had offered to shift Tonks to another subject, but she had insisted on defense, claiming it was the only area where her qualifications were relevant. The headmaster had acquiesced, perhaps because the defense position's curse made it perpetually difficult to fill. What troubled her more was the strange sense of wrongness she felt whenever Quirrell was nearby, a subtle dissonance she couldn't quite place but that triggered her Auror instincts. She'd added him to her mental list of people to watch closely. Her observations were interrupted by the arrival of the first years, led by Minerva McGonagall. Tonks straightened, eyes searching until she found the familiar mop of untidy black hair. Harry walked beside Ron Weasley, his expression one of carefully modulated awe, not too overwhelmed, which might draw attention to his prior knowledge, but not too nonchalant either. Their eyes met briefly, and Tonks felt a surge of pride at his perfect performance. He gave no sign of recognition beyond the normal curiosity a first year might show toward the staff table. 3 years of preparation were paying off. As McGonagall placed the sorting hat on its stool, Tonks found herself unexpectedly nervous. They had discussed Harry's sorting extensively, analyzing the advantages and disadvantages of each house. Gryffindor was expected but would place him directly in Dumbledore's path. Ravenclaw would provide intellectual resources but fewer loyal allies. Hufflepuff would offer protection through loyalty but might isolate him from key events. And Slytherin, while offering valuable cunning and connections, would immediately raise red flags with Dumbledore. Ultimately, they had agreed Harry should let the sorting hat decide based on his true personality, but with a slight preference for Gryffindor if given a choice. The hat would see through any attempt at deception anyway, and forcing a placement might cause more problems than it solved. The sorting progressed alphabetically. Granger, Hermione, became a Gryffindor after nearly a minute under the hat, confirming their intelligence that the bright Muggleborn would be a key figure in Harry's year. Draco Malfoy was immediately sorted into Slytherin, his smug expression suggesting he'd never considered any other outcome. Then, Potter, Harry, and the hall fell silent before erupting in whispers. Harry walked forward with as much dignity as an 11-year-old could muster, his face a careful mask of nervous anticipation. Tonks held her breath as the hat dropped over his eyes, obscuring the upper half of his face. 1 second passed, then 5, then 30. A minute. 2 minutes. Harry's sorting was taking longer than any previous student, and the whispers in the hall grew louder. Finally, the rip near the hat's brim opened wide, and it shouted, "Gryffindor." The Gryffindor table exploded with cheers, the Weasley twins starting a chant of, "We got Potter. We got Potter." Harry removed the hat, his expression one of genuine relief as he made his way to sit beside Ron, who had also been sorted into Gryffindor moments later. Tonks allowed herself a small smile. Step 1 accomplished. Harry was positioned exactly where they wanted him, where he could form the right friendships, access the right resources, and be close enough to Dumbledore's attention to monitor the headmaster's plans without raising suspicion. As the feast appeared and conversation filled the hall, Tonks glanced toward Dumbledore. The headmaster was watching Harry with that familiar twinkle in his blue eyes, a benevolent smile on his face. To anyone else, he appeared simply pleased to welcome the boy who lived to Hogwarts. But Tonks knew better. That expression masked calculation, the gaze of a chess master watching a crucial piece move into position. What Dumbledore didn't realize was that this particular piece had developed a mind of its own, and the support of players he didn't even know were in the game. After the feast, as the students were led to their dormitories, Dumbledore approached her. "Professor Tonks, a moment if you would." "Of course, Headmaster," she replied, her acclimacy shields automatically strengthening. "I noticed you watching young Harry Potter during the sorting," he said mildly. "Having spent so long ensuring his safety, it must be satisfying to see him begin his magical education." The comment was casual but probing. Tonks maintained an appropriately professional interest. "It is, though in truth I was watching all the first years. Trying to identify which ones might need extra attention in defense. Potter carries a significant burden of expectation, that often translates to either overconfidence or insecurity in the classroom." Dumbledore nodded, seemingly satisfied with her response. "A thoughtful approach. You'll make an excellent teacher, I think." He paused, then added, "Potter's years at Hogwarts will present unique challenges. I may occasionally ask for your observations of his progress, given your familiarity with his background." "Of course, Headmaster," Tonks agreed smoothly. "Though my interactions with him in Little Whinging were necessarily limited. I know little of his character beyond what I observed at a distance. Nevertheless, your perspective may prove valuable." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled benignly. "Now, I believe you have a curriculum to finalize. Your first class is with the third-year Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws tomorrow, is it not?" "It is. I should review my notes one last time." As Dumbledore glided away, Tonks released a carefully controlled breath. The first of many such exchanges, she was certain. A careful dance of half-truths and misdirection that would continue throughout the year. In her quarters that evening, Tonks opened her communication journal to find a message already waiting in Harry's familiar handwriting, made it to Gryffindor. Ron's in my dorm, along with Neville Longbottom, Dean Thomas, and Seamus Finnegan. The hat wanted to put me in Slytherin at first, said I had cunning and a thirst to prove myself, but I asked for Gryffindor instead. Was that right? Also, Quirrell gives me a headache when I look at him. Literally, my scar hurts. That can't be normal. Tonks frowned at the last part. Quirrell affecting Harry's scar was definitely not something they had anticipated. She wrote back, Gryffindor is perfect. Trust your instincts. Very interesting about Quirrell, avoid direct eye contact with him for now and strengthen your occlumency shields before bed. Note when and where the pain occurs. We'll investigate. Be careful in his class. She hesitated, then added, proud of you today. Perfect performance. Remember, curious but not exceptional, friendly but not desperate, attentive but not brilliant. Make Weasley and Granger your priorities for friendship. First data class Thursday, be prepared to be treated like any other student. The journal glowed briefly as the message was transmitted. Tonks closed it and tucked it into a hidden compartment in her trunk, protected by multiple security charms. Then she turned to her lesson plans, determined to establish herself as a competent but unremarkable professor, exactly the kind Dumbledore would underestimate. By Halloween, patterns had emerged. Harry had successfully integrated into Gryffindor, forming the expected friendship with Ron Weasley and, after a rocky start, with Hermione Granger. His classwork was deliberately middle of the pack in most subjects, though Tonks noted he allowed himself to excel slightly in defense against the dark arts, a natural enthusiasm that wouldn't raise suspicions. Quirrell's strange effect on Harry's scar continued intermittently, particularly when Harry was near the third-floor corridor, the forbidden area where the Philosopher's Stone was hidden. This correlation, combined with Moody's intelligence about Voldemort's wraith seeking a host, had led their group to a disturbing conclusion: Quirrell was likely possessed by what remained of the Dark Lord. It fits, Moody growled during their secure communication through a modified Flood connection. Quirrell's sabbatical took him to Albania, the last known location of Voldemort's spirit. He returns changed, nervous, stuttering, wearing that ridiculous turban. And he affects Potter's scar, which contains a Horcrux. The pieces align too neatly to ignore. Why would Dumbledore allow a possessed professor into the school? Tonks questioned, though she had her suspicions. The same reason he's hidden the Philosopher's Stone behind a series of obstacles first years could overcome, Moody replied grimly. He's setting a stage. Creating a controlled confrontation between Potter and Voldemort. Using children as bait, Tonks muttered. And as pawns. Precisely. Question is, what do we do about it? Direct intervention exposes our hand. Inaction puts Potter at risk. Tonks considered the options. We continue as planned for now. I'll increase my monitoring of Quirrell, try to confirm the possession. Harry maintains his current course, building allies, developing skills, appearing to follow Dumbledore's breadcrumbs while we work on the Horcrux problem. The Horcrux problem remained their greatest challenge. Extensive research through their network had identified several methods of destroying Horcruxes: basilisk venom, fiend fire, certain goblin-forged weapons, but all would kill the container. In Harry's case, that was unacceptable. A potential breakthrough had come from an unexpected source. Bill Weasley, brought into their confidence through the twins, had suggested investigating Egyptian soul magic. Ancient Egyptian wizards had developed sophisticated techniques for separating curses from living hosts, techniques that modern cursebreakers still studied. It's not exactly the same, Bill had explained via a secure communication, but the principles might apply. I've found references to a ritual used to extract foreign magical influences from living vessels without harming the host. It was designed for possession cases but theoretically could work for a soul fragment. It was their most promising lead yet, though gathering the necessary components and translating the ancient spellwork would take time. Meanwhile, they had to navigate the immediate dangers of Hogwarts under Dumbledore's watchful eye. Those dangers became starkly evident on Halloween night when a mountain troll was somehow let into the castle. Tonks had been patrolling the third-floor corridor, suspicious of Quirrell's movements, when Dumbledore ordered all teachers to the dungeon. Her aura instincts immediately raised red flags. Leaving the third floor unguarded while staff were distracted was too convenient. Instead of following the other professors, Tonks disillusioned herself and remained in position. Sure enough, minutes later Quirrell appeared, moving with none of his usual nervous mannerisms, heading directly for the forbidden corridor. Tonks followed silently, observing as he attempted to bypass the three-headed dog guarding the trapdoor. The creature lunged, catching Quirrell's leg before he could fully evade. He retreated, cursing in a voice very different from his usual stutter. Before she could see more, Severus Snape appeared, his own movements stealthy and purposeful. Tonks was forced to retreat to avoid discovery, but not before noting the calculating look Snape gave Quirrell, not surprise, but confirmation. Later that night, her journal glowed with an urgent message from Harry. Hermione was trapped in the bathroom with the troll. Ron and I went to warn her and ended up knocking it out with its own club. Teachers found us after. I know we were supposed to maintain low profiles, but we couldn't leave her. Did we mess up the plan? Tonks read the message with a mixture of pride and concern. The three children had faced a fully grown mountain troll and survived, impressive, but exactly the kind of dangerous situation they'd hoped to shield Harry from. You did the right thing, she wrote back. Friendship and loyalty come first. Are you all okay? Any injuries? Also, important, did you see Quirrell or Snape during this incident? Harry's reply came quickly, we're fine. McGonagall took points but then gave them back for sheer dumb luck. Quirrell was useless, fainted when reporting the troll. Snape came in later with a torn robe and bloody leg. Limping. Definitely wasn't in the dungeon the whole time. Interesting. So Snape had encountered the three-headed dog as well. But had he been trying to stop Quirrell or pursuing the stone himself? Snape's allegiances had always been murky. Dumbledore trusted him implicitly, but Moody remained deeply suspicious. Keep watching both of them, Tonks instructed. And Harry, well done tonight. But please try not to make a habit of confronting trolls. My heart can only take so much. His response was pure Harry, no promises. Trouble seems to find me. And that, Tonks reflected as she closed the journal, was precisely why their network existed, because trouble would always find Harry Potter, especially with Albus Dumbledore orchestrating much of it. As November's chill gave way to December's frost, the castle transformed for the holidays. Hagrid dragged massive evergreens into the Great Hall. Professor Flitwick decorated them with enchanted ornaments, and suits of armor were charmed to sing carols, sometimes with questionable lyrics, courtesy of Peeves. In her classroom, Tonks maintained her carefully crafted teaching persona. Her classes were practical and engaging but deliberately traditional, nothing innovative enough to draw Dumbledore's special attention. She was friendly with her colleagues but formed no close friendships, citing her focus on developing her teaching skills as the reason for her occasional aloofness. With students, she was firm but fair, giving particular attention to those who struggled while ensuring talented students were appropriately challenged. Her treatment of Harry was meticulously calibrated, the same professional interest she showed all students, with perhaps a shade more attention given his Voldemort connection, which would be expected of any defense professor. Only in the privacy of their journal communications did she allow herself to be what she truly was to Harry, mentor, confidant, family. The Quidditch match between Gryffindor and Slytherin tested her composure severely. When Harry's broom began bucking violently midair, Tonks immediately spotted both Quirrell and Snape muttering continuously, their eyes fixed on the struggling boy. Without drawing attention to herself, she began a countercurse of her own, simultaneously sending a mild stinging hex toward Quirrell. The momentary disruption was enough, Harry regained control of his broom and, in a display of flying skill that Tonks knew came from their secret practice sessions in the countryside near Little Whinging, caught the snitch in a spectacular dive. That evening, their journal conversation was tense. It was Quirrell, Harry wrote. Hermione thought it was Snape because she saw him chanting, but I could feel it was Quirrell through my scar. The pain was intense when he was focusing on me. Snape was performing a counter-curse, Tonks confirmed. I'm almost certain now that Quirrell is possessed. We need to accelerate our plans. The stone? Harry asked. Not yet. We still don't know all the protections or Dumbledore's full intentions. But I'm concerned he's allowing this situation to develop too far. Keep your distance from Quirrell, strengthen your occlumency, and never be alone with him. As the Christmas holidays approached, they faced a decision. Harry had initially planned to remain at Hogwarts, allowing them to investigate the third-floor corridor while the castle was nearly empty. But Dumbledore's increasingly focused attention on Harry, coincidental meetings in corridors, seemingly casual questions about his adjustment to Hogwarts, suggested the headmaster was accelerating his own plans. He's testing the waters, Tonks told Kingsley during a secure meeting in Hogsmeade. Seeing how malleable Harry is, how inclined to view him as a mentor figure. And the results? Kingsley asked. Mixed, from his perspective, I think. Harry is respectful but not adoring. Curious but not dependent. It's bothering Dumbledore, though he hides it well. He expected a neglected child desperate for guidance and approval. Which is precisely what Harry would have been without your intervention, Kingsley noted. The question is whether Dumbledore suspects outside influence or simply attributes Harry's unexpected independence to inherent resilience. I'm not sure, Tonks admitted. But I don't want to risk Harry staying at the castle with both Dumbledore and Quirrell present and most of the staff gone. The temptation to manipulate or harm him would be too great. They decided Harry would return to the Dursleys for Christmas, but with a plan for him to spend most of the holiday at the Burrow through Ron's invitation, a development they had subtly orchestrated. This would give Harry his first experience of a proper wizarding family Christmas while keeping him away from both Dumbledore and the Dursleys' neglect. Tonks herself would remain at Hogwarts, using the opportunity to investigate Quirrell more thoroughly and possibly the stone's protections, depending on what she discovered. The plan worked perfectly until Christmas morning, when Harry's urgent message disrupted everything, received an invisibility cloak for Christmas. Note says it was my father's and the sender was holding it for him. Signed only, use it well. Dumbledore? Tonks stared at the message in alarm. The invisibility cloak was unexpected, another piece on Dumbledore's chessboard, undoubtedly, but to what end? Almost certainly from Dumbledore, she wrote back. Why give it to you now? It's valuable beyond measure, not just a sentimental gift. Be careful. He wants you to use it for something specific, probably exploring the castle, maybe even the third-floor corridor. This is a test. Harry's response showed his developing strategic thinking, or an opportunity. With the cloak, I can move around unseen. Investigate what Quirrell/Dumbledore are planning without risking detection. Tonks frowned. It was logical but dangerous. Too risky alone. Wait until you return. We'll plan carefully. But Harry, despite his training and preparation, was still an 11-year-old boy with his father's cloak and a castle full of secrets. His next message came late that night, found a strange mirror in an unused classroom. Shows me with my parents and, you. Standing together like a family. Ron saw himself as head boy and Quidditch captain. Dumbledore caught me my second night there, said it shows the deepest desire of our hearts and is being moved tomorrow. Called it the Mirror of Erist. I think he planned for me to find it. Tonks felt a complex mixture of emotions reading Harry's description of his heart's desire, pride that she featured in it, sorrow that it could never be reality with his parents, and anger at Dumbledore's manipulations. Of course he planned it, she wrote back. The mirror is another test, seeing what you desire most. What did you tell him you saw? Just my family, Not you. Instinct told me to keep that private. Good instinct. The mirror is dangerous, Harry. It shows impossible dreams, things that can drive people mad with longing. Stay away from it now. Despite her warning, Tonks understood the mirror's allure. What would she see if she looked into it? Harry, safe and happy, free from both Voldemort and Dumbledore's machinations. A world where they could acknowledge their bond openly. Or something else entirely. She never got the chance to find out. The next day, the mirror was gone from the classroom, moved to its final position as the last protection for the Philosopher's Stone. When Harry returned from the Christmas break, Tonks noted subtle changes in him, a new confidence, a stronger sense of purpose. His time with the Weasleys had given him something precious, the experience of being treated as just Harry, not the boy who lived or the unwanted nephew or even Tonks' secret protégé. Just a normal boy welcomed into a loving family. Their covert investigation of Quirrell intensified, with Harry reporting every instance of scar pain and Tonks monitoring the professor's movements. Their network continued gathering intelligence, Moody tracking Voldemort's sightings, Bill Weasley translating the Egyptian ritual, the Weasley twins developing magical devices to aid their surveillance. By spring, they had confirmed their theory, Quirrell was indeed possessed by Voldemort, who sought the Philosopher's Stone to regain a body. Dumbledore clearly knew this but was allowing the situation to develop, presumably as Harry's first test in the long game leading to his prophesied confrontation with Voldemort. What the headmaster didn't know was that they had their own plans in motion. Bill Weasley had successfully translated the Egyptian ritual and identified the necessary components. Most were rare but obtainable: sphinx hair, scarab beetle shells preserved in natron, papyrus inscribed with specific hieroglyphs in ink made from the blood of a freely given sacrifice. Tonks had already volunteered. The final component, however, presented a problem. The ritual required the physical presence of the main soul from which the fragment had broken. In Harry's case, that meant Voldemort himself. It's impossible, Tonks had initially protested when they discussed it via their secure communication. We can't just invite Voldemort to participate in a ritual to help Harry. Not impossible, Moody countered, just complicated. If Quirrell is possessed by Voldemort's main spirit, and if a confrontation is already being orchestrated by Dumbledore, we could theoretically prepare the ritual to be performed at that moment, Kingsley concluded. But it would require perfect timing, extensive preparation, and Harry would still face significant danger. There must be another way, Tonks insisted. But as the school year progressed and their research continued, no other viable method emerged. The ritual remained their best hope for removing the Horcrux without harming Harry, and Quirrell's possession presented their only known access to Voldemort's main soul fragment. The decision was agonizing, but ultimately clear: they would prepare for the ritual to coincide with the confrontation Dumbledore was orchestrating. They would use the headmaster's plan against him, turning Harry's test into an opportunity for liberation. By late May, the pieces were in place. Bill Weasley had secretly entered the country, bringing the prepared ritual components. The Weasley twins had created monitoring devices that would alert them the moment Harry entered the third-floor corridor. Tonks had mastered the necessary spellwork, practicing until she could perform the complex incantations under pressure. All they needed now was the trigger, the event that would send Harry after the stone, leading to the confrontation with Quirrell/Voldemort. It came sooner than expected. On a clear night in early June, Dumbledore was suddenly called to the Ministry, a summons they later learned had been manufactured. Harry, recognizing the pattern from their discussions of potential scenarios, immediately sent a warning through their journal: Dumbledore gone to Ministry. Convenient timing. McGonagall dismissive when we warned about the stone. Believe someone will make attempt tonight. Hermione and Ron insist on helping. Cannot dissuade them without revealing too much. Tonks' response was immediate: we're ready. Stick to the plan. Keep your friends safe but don't prevent the confrontation. The ritual is prepared. Signal when you enter the corridor. I'll be monitoring and will intervene at the critical moment. The waiting was excruciating. Tonks positioned herself in an unused classroom near the third-floor corridor, disillusioned and surrounded by the ritual components Bill had provided. The monitoring charm, disguised as a simple wristwatch, would alert her the moment Harry passed through the trapdoor. Hours passed. Then, just after midnight, the charm vibrated against her wrist. Harry, Ron, and Hermione had entered the forbidden corridor. The final gambit had begun. Tonks gathered the ritual materials and moved swiftly to the entrance. Through the Weasley twins' monitoring devices, she tracked the trio's progress past Fluffy, already asleep, thanks to music still playing, through the Devil's Snare, Hermione's expertise evident in their quick passage, past the flying keys, Harry's seeking skills proving valuable, across the life-sized wizard's chess set, Ron's strategic mind navigating them through. Then came the separation, Ron injured in the chess match, Hermione staying behind at the logic puzzle after ensuring Harry had what he needed to proceed alone. Exactly as they had anticipated, based on their analysis of Dumbledore's likely intentions. The headmaster had designed the obstacles to separate Harry from his friends, ensuring he faced Voldemort one-on-one. What Dumbledore hadn't designed was what would happen next. As Harry entered the final chamber, Tonks moved into position, using passages known only to a select few staff members to bypass the obstacles. Bill Weasley met her at a predetermined junction, his curse-breaking skills having opened an alternative route to the final chamber. "Everything ready?" she asked tensely. Bill nodded, his scarred face solemn. "Ritual circle drawn. Components prepared. But Tonks, the timing will be crucial. Too early, and Voldemort won't be fully manifested enough for the ritual to work. Too late. And Harry could be killed," she finished grimly. "I know. We'll get it right. We have to." They positioned themselves in a hidden observation point, a small alcove concealed by both disillusionment charms and Bill's specialized cursebreaker wards. From here, they could see into the final chamber where Harry now stood before the mirror of Eriste, Quirrell circling him like a predator. "I can sense your fear, Potter," Quirrell said, his stutter completely gone. "And why shouldn't you be afraid? Standing before the Dark Lord without your precious Dumbledore to protect you." "You're not Voldemort," Harry replied, his voice steadier than Tonks had dared hope. "You're just his puppet." Quirrell's face contorted with rage. "You dare speak his name? You, a mere child?" He began unwrapping his turban. "Perhaps you should address him directly." As the turban fell away, revealing the grotesque face embedded in the back of Quirrell's head, Tonks felt bile rise in her throat. Voldemort's features were distorted, barely human, but recognizable from the descriptions in Auror files: flat, snake-like nostrils, red eyes burning with malevolence, skin pallid and stretched. "Harry Potter," the face hissed, Quirrell turning to allow Voldemort to face the boy. "See what I have become. Mere shadow and vapor, forced to share another's body. But with the elixir of life, I will create a body of my own. Now, give me the stone in your pocket." Harry's hand moved to his pocket, where Tonks knew the stone must be, somehow acquired from the mirror through Dumbledore's enchantment. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Voldemort manifested, focused on Harry, the Horcrux connection between them active as evidenced by the blood now seeping from Harry's scar. Tonks nodded to Bill, and together they stepped from their hiding place, dropping the disillusionment charms. "Now, Harry!" Tonks shouted, casting the first incantation of the ritual before Quirrell could fully turn. Harry, prepared for this moment through months of secret training, immediately dropped to one knee, pressing his palm against a specific point on the floor where Bill had earlier inscribed a hidden rune. The stone beneath him began to glow with ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, forming a perfect circle that encompassed both him and Quirrell/Voldemort. "What is this?" Voldemort's face contorted with fury and confusion. "Quirrell, kill them." But Quirrell found himself unable to move, trapped within the ritual circle as Bill continued the incantation, his wand tracing complex patterns in the air that left trails of golden light. Tonks moved swiftly to Harry's side, placing the prepared components, the sphinx hair, the scarab beetles, the papyrus inscribed with her blood, at cardinal points around the circle. Her wand moved in perfect synchrony with Bill's, her voice steady as she recited the ancient words that would separate the soul fragment from its unwilling host. "You dare interfere?" Voldemort hissed, his red eyes fixed on Tonks. "You cannot imagine the power you oppose, the knowledge I possess. No ritual can defeat Lord Voldemort." "This isn't about defeating you," Tonks replied, not breaking her concentration. "Not today. This is about saving Harry from what you did to him as a baby." Understanding dawned in those inhuman eyes. "The boy is a Horcrux," Voldemort whispered, then began to laugh, a high, cold sound that raised goosebumps on Tonks' arms. "You fool! Destroy that connection and you destroy his only protection from me. The very thing that prevents me from killing him." "We'll take our chances," Tonks said grimly, completing the final sequence of the incantation. The ritual circle flared with blinding light. Harry screamed, a sound that tore at Tonks' heart, as something dark and viscous began to seep from his scar. Simultaneously, Quirrell's body convulsed, the face on the back of his head stretching and distorting as if being pulled by an invisible force. "Hold on, Harry," Tonks called, maintaining the complex wand work despite her desperate desire to go to him. "Almost there." The darkness extracting from Harry's scar took form, a writhing, snake-like entity that hovered momentarily in the air between Harry and Quirrell. Then, with a sound like a thunderclap, it was violently pulled toward the face on the back of Quirrell's head, merging with the greater soul fragment there. The resulting magical backlash threw everyone backward. Tonks slammed against the chamber wall, momentarily dazed. When her vision cleared, she saw Harry lying motionless on the floor, the ritual circle now dark and inactive. Quirrell's body lay several feet away, lifeless, a look of horror frozen on his face. Of Voldemort, there was no sign beyond a fading mist that seemed to be seeping through the ceiling. "Harry!" Tonks scrambled to his side, heart pounding with fear. "Harry, can you hear me?" For one terrible moment, there was no response. Then Harry's eyelids fluttered, and he looked up at her with clear green eyes, eyes unclouded by pain for the first time since she'd known him. "Did it work?" he whispered. "It feels different. Lighter." Tonks pulled him into a fierce embrace, tears streaming down her face. "It worked. The Horcrux is gone. You're free of it." Bill approached, his own face streaked with sweat and magical exhaustion. "We need to move quickly. Dumbledore will know something has happened, the castle's wards will have registered this level of magical activity." "Let me handle Dumbledore," came a new voice from the chamber entrance. Kingsley Shacklebolt stood there, his tall frame silhouetted against the doorway. "Get Harry to safety. We have a safe house prepared." "No," Harry said, struggling to sit up. "No safe house. Not yet. I need to face Dumbledore now, while the evidence is fresh. While he can't deny what he's done." Tonks exchanged glances with Kingsley and Bill. They had planned to extract Harry, to give him time to recover before any confrontation with Dumbledore. But the determination in those green eyes was unmistakable. "Are you sure?" she asked. "You've just been through an incredibly traumatic magical procedure. You need rest, healing." "What I need is answers," Harry replied, his young voice firm despite his obvious exhaustion. "And I'll never get them if we run now. Dumbledore will spin this, find a way to make it fit his narrative. We have to confront him while we have the advantage of surprise." Before any of them could respond, a swirl of magic announced a new arrival. Albus Dumbledore stood in the doorway, his usual grandfatherly demeanor replaced by a cold fury that made the air around him crackle with power. "What have you done?" he demanded, taking in the scene, Harry being supported by Tonks, Bill Weasley standing protectively nearby, Kingsley blocking the entrance, Quirrell's body lying discarded like a puppet with cut strings. "Do you have any idea of the forces you have interfered with?" "We've removed your weapon of war from an innocent child," Tonks replied, rising to stand between Dumbledore and Harry. "We've freed him from carrying a piece of Voldemort's soul without sacrificing his life. Something you claimed was impossible. Dumbledore's eyes widened fractionally, the only indication of his surprise. You knew about the Horcrux. How? You're not the only one with sources of information, Albus, Kingsley said, stepping further into the chamber. Not the only one who can interpret prophecies or research dark magic. The difference is what we chose to do with that knowledge. And what exactly do you think I chose? Dumbledore asked, his voice dangerously soft. To raise me as a pig for slaughter, Harry said, his clear voice cutting through the tension. He stood now, shaky but determined. To mold me into someone willing to die when you decided it was time. To face Voldemort again and again until one final confrontation where I would sacrifice myself, destroying the Horcrux in my scar and making Voldemort mortal again. Dumbledore's silence was confirmation enough. You left me with people who hated magic, Harry continued, gaining strength as he spoke. People who called me a freak, who made me sleep in a cupboard, who never showed me a moment's kindness. You isolated me from the wizarding world, made sure I knew nothing of my heritage or parents beyond what you wanted me to know. Why? So I'd be grateful to whoever rescued me? So Hogwarts would seem like salvation instead of my birthright? So I'd look to you as the grandfather I never had? My decisions were made for the greater good, Dumbledore finally responded, though his usual certainty seemed diminished. You cannot understand the complexity. Don't patronize me, Harry interrupted, his voice sharp despite his age. I understand perfectly. You decided my individual happiness, my right to a childhood, was less important than your strategy against Voldemort. You decided I was an acceptable sacrifice. And you, Dumbledore turned to Tonks, anger replacing his momentary doubt. I trusted you to protect him, not to undermine years of careful planning. Do you realize what you've done? The prophecy still stands, Tonks cut in. Harry may still be the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord. But he'll do it on his terms, with full knowledge and free choice, supported by people who love him, not as your sacrificial lamb. Love, Dumbledore repeated, a strange expression crossing his face. You speak of love, yet you've systematically deceived me for years. How long, Nymphadora? How long have you been interfering with my plans for Harry? Since the moment I saw him sleeping in a cupboard under the stairs, Tonks replied without hesitation. Since I realized the great Albus Dumbledore had placed the savior of the wizarding world with abusive muggles and never once checked on his welfare. That was when I became more than his guardian. That was when I became his family. Something shifted in Dumbledore's eyes, a flicker of uncertainty, perhaps even shame. Family, he echoed. You see yourself as his family? She is my family, Harry said firmly, moving to stand beside Tonks. The only real family I've ever known. She taught me about magic when you wanted me ignorant. She showed me love when you left me with people who despised me. She protected me from Voldemort and from you. Dumbledore seemed to age before their eyes, the anger draining from him, replaced by a weariness that revealed the true weight of his years. I never wanted you to suffer needlessly, Harry. I truly believed the blood protection was worth the hardship. And the Horcrux? Bill spoke up. Did you truly believe there was no way to remove it without killing him? I researched extensively, Dumbledore admitted. Consulted the greatest minds in magical theory. The consensus was clear, the container must be destroyed beyond magical repair. You didn't look far enough, Bill replied. The Egyptians understood soul magic millennia ago. Their knowledge has been preserved in the curse-breaking community, passed down through generations. The ritual was complex but achievable, Tonks added. All it required was the presence of the main soul from which the fragment broke, conveniently provided by your orchestrated confrontation, and the will to save Harry rather than sacrifice him. Dumbledore's gaze moved from face to face, finally settling on Kingsley. And you, old friend? How long have you been part of this conspiracy? Since I saw the evidence of the Dursleys' treatment of Harry, Kingsley replied steadily. Since I recognized that your greater good had blinded you to individual suffering. I respect you, Albus, but I could not be complicit in the sacrifice of a child. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Dumbledore seemed to be processing the full extent of what had happened, not just the removal of the Horcrux, but the years of careful planning and counter-planning that had led to this moment. What happens now? He finally asked, his voice lacking its usual certainty. Now we negotiate, Tonks said firmly. New terms for Harry's future. No more secrets, no more manipulations. Starting with Sirius Black, Harry added, his expression hardening. We know he never received a trial. We want that rectified immediately. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. You've been busy indeed. Sirius Black's situation is complicated. It's only complicated because you allowed an innocent man to rot in Azkaban, Kingsley interrupted. We have evidence suggesting Peter Pettigrew is alive, evidence you could have found years ago if you'd looked. And we want the truth about my parents, Harry continued. The full truth, not the edited highlights you've been feeding me through Hagrid and others. Dumbledore looked at Harry with new eyes, not as a child to be protected and guided, but as a young person with agency and determination. You've changed, he observed. This is not the boy I expected to find when you came to Hogwarts. Thank Dora for that, Harry said, a hint of pride entering his voice. She made sure I wouldn't be the desperate, ignorant child you were counting on. She made sure I'd be ready for both Voldemort and you. Tonks placed a protective hand on Harry's shoulder, her stance making it clear that any future plans for him would go through her first. I see I have much to reconsider, Dumbledore said finally. Much to answer for, perhaps. But Harry, Voldemort is not gone. The ritual may have removed the Horcrux from your scar, but he has other anchors to this world. He will return, and when he does, the prophecy will still hold. We know about the other Horcruxes, Tonks said, revealing another card in their hand. We've been researching them for years. The diary. The ring. The locket. The cup. Something of Ravenclaw's. The snake he'll eventually create. We're already hunting them. Genuine shock registered on Dumbledore's face. How could you possibly? You're not the only one with sources and methods, Kingsley repeated. The question is whether you'll continue to work alone, keeping secrets that endanger us all, or whether you'll join us in a true partnership. Dumbledore looked from Kingsley to Bill, from Tonks to Harry, clearly reassessing years of assumptions and plans. You leave me little choice, he said finally. But perhaps that is for the best. Isolation has not served my judgment well, it seems. Then let's start with honesty, Tonks proposed. Full disclosure of what you know about Voldemort's Horcruxes. Full support for Sirius Black's exoneration. And most importantly, a new arrangement for Harry's guardianship. The blood protection, Dumbledore began, is maintained by his annual return to Privet Drive, not by living there year-round, Tonks countered. We've researched this thoroughly. A 2-week stay each summer is sufficient to recharge the protection. The rest of the time, he stays with me or another appropriate guardian. Dumbledore's shoulders sagged slightly in defeat. As you say. It seems you have thought of everything. Not everything, Harry spoke up, his voice suddenly uncertain, more befitting his 11 years. Just enough to have a real life. To have a choice in my own future. Something softened in Dumbledore's expression. A choice I should have ensured you had from the beginning. I apologize, Harry. My focus on the greater good made me forget the individual good that should have been my priority with you. The apology, unexpected and seemingly genuine, created a momentary silence in the chamber. This isn't over, Tonks said finally. There's much to resolve, much to plan. But for now, Harry needs medical attention and rest. We all do. Of course, Dumbledore nodded. The hospital wing, no, Tonks interrupted. No more Hogwarts tonight. We have our own healers waiting. Harry will return when he's ready, with a full explanation prepared for his friends. Dumbledore looked as if he might object, then nodded again. Very well. But we will need to meet soon, all of us, to align our strategies against Voldemort. He will not remain formless forever. Tomorrow evening, Kingsley suggested. My office at the Ministry. Neutral ground. Agreed, Dumbledore conceded. Until then. With a swirl of his robes, the headmaster turned and left the chamber, his usual commanding presence diminished by the night's revelations. As soon as he was gone, Tonks turned to Harry, her professional demeanor crumbling as concern took over. Are you really all right? The ritual was intense, we need to get you checked immediately. Harry managed a tired smile. I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. It's like, a pressure I never even knew was there is suddenly gone. His hand went to his scar. It doesn't hurt anymore. For the first time I can remember, it doesn't hurt at all. Tonks pulled him into another fierce embrace, no longer caring about maintaining any pretense of professional distance. We did it, she whispered. You're free. We all are, Kingsley observed, a rare smile lightening his solemn features. Free to face what's coming on our own terms, not Dumbledore's. As they made their way out of the chamber, supporting an exhausted but triumphant Harry between them, Tonks felt a weight lift from her own shoulders. The years of deception, of careful planning and counter-planning, had culminated in this moment of victory, not final victory against Voldemort, but something perhaps more important, victory for Harry's right to his own life. The path ahead remained challenging. Voldemort would return. The other Horcruxes needed to be found and destroyed. Sirius Black's innocence had to be proven. And they would need to establish a new working relationship with Dumbledore, one based on partnership rather than manipulation. But for the first time, Tonks truly believed they could succeed. Not just in defeating Voldemort, but in ensuring Harry Potter lived a life worth fighting for, a life filled with family, friends, and the freedom to make his own choices. As they stepped out into the cool night air, Harry looked up at her with those clear green eyes, eyes no longer shadowed by the darkness that had resided within him for so long. Thank you, he said simply. For everything. For becoming my guardian. For loving me enough to fight for me. For becoming, whatever you needed to become for me. Tonks smiled through her tears, remembering the vow she'd made 3 years ago in her little whinging flat, to be whatever Harry needed, even if it meant becoming Dumbledore's secret adversary. Always, she promised. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Harry's answering smile was like the sunrise after the longest night, bright with promise, warm with certainty. Together, he agreed. And in that moment, standing under the stars with the boy who had changed her life as completely as she had changed his, Nymphadora Tonks knew she had become exactly what was needed, not just a guardian, not just a teacher, not even an assassin of fate. She had become family. And that, more than any magic or prophecy, would be the power that ultimately saved them all. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.